ain't a world that walks the line. There's a rare few who think outside the box together for the crew. To break the equations, not down to any rule. Exposing to the world the universe's own view. It takes the talent of the craftsman, it takes the mind of the fool, to make the vision realize energy and matter in a duel. To a break, to a duel. The old man Bill was running through his head. Cheryl probably got it hiding under his bed. Penny up to Annie making power for days. Don't listen to a word that the straight dope says. Mike building batteries that power a ship. Victor comes and talking math, that's the water spiral dip. Sean chucking plasma bolts a mile long. Sheila on the video making tone chuck the prongs. Burning breaking matter, they said it couldn't be done. And to all the people in the chat, I know you're having fun. So it's time to spend your Saturday with the dope and old man Bills.
Wow, I gotta love this StreamYard. Hello everyone, what's up? My name is Nathan, otherwise known as Old Man Bill. Show will be here in just a little bit, man. We're rocking on today, guys. Talking about some gravity. There's some weird, funky theories out there, man, and I just don't understand part of them. So let's just get into it, man. Gravity in flat Earth, how does it work? I mean, oh wow. Oh man, now this thing's not working right. Oh, there we go. There's Joe. What's up?
Hey, everybody.
Dude, they keep changing the buttons on this StreamYard. They're absolutely driving me insane again.
Nice, yeah. I was running a little bit behind today as usual. You know, it's Friday at 5, so for me.
It's all right, man. We got gravity on the conversation for today, Joe.
Oh, very cool. Good topic, I'd say.
Yeah, well, you know, there's flat earthers, there's donut earthers, there's all kinds of weird things, you know what I mean? Is the moon hollow? I mean, there's got to be something to all of it. So what do you think, Joe?
Well, what I think is that gravity is emergent. I think that it's a direct correlation to the relationship between matter and its exchange with energy. So anytime that you have matter that is having, you know, a relationship and an exchange with energy, and then you have matter coming together, there's certain amounts of pull that matter has relative to one another based on the amount of energy density that it actually accumulates. And it directly correlates to my paper and the theory that I brought up, where that time is somewhat emergent and mechanism and subject to the same exchange. So the same things that make one thing go kind of make the other. And that's, although they haven't outright said that gravity is related to space and time, how can it not be? All the measures have to do with the space aspect, whereas everything else has to do with the time aspect.
Okay, so let's just kind of go through it a little bit. We know they're emergent, right? So let's just put it out there. Space and time. How do I say? It's not space and time. I hate the link between that. It bothers me. Time and gravity are emergent. Okay, and that's one thing. But then geometry matters in doing this. So how do we get a flat Earth to have gravity? So let's just say entertain the idea for a minute. Like you and I both believe the world is a sphere, right? I don't think that's a far-fetched for anybody who understands geometry. But let's just go for the flat earthers right now. Is there any possible way to make that gravitationally plausible?
With something flat, I mean, for what it's worth, the geometry of the Earth, right? Although directly related to the gravity that we experience, okay, if you change the geometry, the forces are still there, Okay, but the relative forces lack the same vectors because you're going down dimensionally. Once you turn something from a sphere to a round disk, you lose an entire axis that exists and relationships because of that axis. So now your gravitational force, which would be outward of this sphere pulling in, would transform into centrifugal force, which is exactly what you would experience whenever you have a rotational plane rather than a rotational sphere.
Okay. Well, so you're saying that it's not really possible because we'd fly off the end, kind of like the graviton machine in the old theme parks and stuff, where you get on it, it looks like a spaceship. You go climbing up the walls as the guy sits in the center, not even feeling like gravity works.
Now, to think that you'd necessarily be thrown off the end is probably not the right way to look at it.
Okay.
You would experience a greater pull, and the vector of the pull, the direction of the pull would be different. See, when you spin a sphere and all of the matter is relative to the center of the sphere, everything gets pulled downward toward the center of the sphere in that circumstance. Okay, in the case of this, you would have a bias just outward. So it's not necessarily that you'd be flung off. Okay, but there would always be a directional pull,
So
toward your closest rim.
would that mean that we fly or that we walk in the clouds?
I don't know that any of that's necessarily the case because I just certainly don't think so. I think that it's you'd be more sorted, right? So if you want to talk about like natural, like evolution or natural progression of things would be sorted out the same as they would centrifugally, right? So you basically have the heavier types of things work their way out over time, but then the lighter things would kind of get sorted. So if you wanted to buy into evolution, animals or people or objects and stuff closer to the central axis point of rotation would probably be far lighter and smaller and made of less dense materials than that which is pushed out, because there would be an absence of dense materials toward the center.
I don't think there's any adhesion effect when you're on a spinning disc. Okay, like the force vector's wrong.
I
Like you
agree.
said, it just goes out. It doesn't go down, and I think that's one of the biggest problems. So then, if you say if that's a problem, then we would have to stop the rotational spin of things, and then we just float around like the moon does around us. So you would think that we are the flat disk spinning around the sun, which means we don't have to rotate, right? And then the moon must rotate around us because we're special in that way, right? So I'm just trying to come up with a plausible theory, and I can't think of in any scenario where flat Earth has gravity, because gravity requires it to pull to the center, like you said, in a sphere, right? So it's naturally happening based on the geometry. In a flat scenario, if that thing spins at all, you're like a merry-go-round. You know what I mean? You're hanging on for dear life. You don't suck down. You start to go push outward, right?
So okay, so here's an interesting thing. I'm going to draw a correlation. This is classic Joe, real time in the moment, never thought of this before. I had given the example before, right, of if you jumped into the hole that goes all the way through the earth and passes right through the center, right? And I said that I never specified exactly what I thought would happen. I just always said, well, you would fall and fall and fall until you fall no more. Now, what becomes interesting is that statement and that thought experiment in this context, because the same as you have a difference in the magnetic, like in a magnetic field, when you have the outside of the magnetic field's interactions, and then you have the insides in interactions, and how they actually are kind of inverse of one another at a certain point, right? So geometrically speaking, if you were to jump into that hole, well, the point where you would fall and fall till you fall no more may not be actually the center of the core where everything's pressing inward on you necessarily, okay? It may actually be geometrically where at the near the equatorial plane, okay, because at that point, the dynamic of being drawn in as opposed to being pushed outward centrifugally, right, is probably it goes into a diffuse state between on a curve, like a bell curve type thing, in the relationship between gravitation and centrifugal force.
So hold
So
on. So does that mean we have a big hole in the center?
I don't know that we have a big hole in the center necessarily. There would just come a point where something not native to that area, right, it would be pushed outward as opposed to being pulled further inward, because the angles start to change as you get closer and closer and closer, and as you grow closer to that central rotational point, once you start entering that zone, you would start to get pushed outward as opposed to pulled inward, I believe. There would be a certain point. Now, where that certain point exists, how far out that stretch is, where that null zone between the two forces kind of switches, that I don't really know, right? But it's as soon as the plane changes, as soon as it goes from an angular plane to a flat plane, then it would go from gravitation to centrifugal force, I believe.
Okay. Well, would there be a civilization underneath it? Like, if we always think the top part, right, is where civilization would be, but if it's flat, would that mean the same thing occurs on the bottom side of it?
Run that by me one more time. If it's flat, then it occurs on the bottom side. Well,
Then is there ever a side that's up? I mean, think about this. If we were always thinking about it, the top side on the top has population, right?
I got you. Is
And
there
flat
is
Earth
there
is
ever
a
a
side on the
point?
bottom. Yeah,
Right. Is there ever a point where what's down to us is up to them or something?
kind of like the
Yeah.
camera just did. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. I apologize. I have to do one quick thing and take 1 second. Okay. Boom. There we go. Yeah, because I want to be able to see the chat. I'm sorry. I've been working on that.
That's all right.
Anyway, so well, so if we think about this more from like a woo perspective, like look at something that's seemingly possibly unrelated, but maybe there's some correlation. If you look at South America and where the Aztecs and Mayans and stuff had all of their types of pyramids, and you look at their relationship to the equator, and then you look at Giza and all that, and you look at that relationship to the equator, what you start to typically find is that there is probably some kind of correlation. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I would have to look further into that, but there's probably some type of correlation. Now, if they say that these civilizations go down, and they may well be further underground than they are above ground, right? And things like that, which kind of plays into the context of what you're saying, right? Now, the reason that it might be significant as to how far they are for the equator is that might actually be the start of the zone where the rotational forces change, right? So you might enter into a situation where you're going down and subject to gravity, but then all of a sudden the gravity changes and shifts from this direction gradually to that direction.
Mhm.
And then that basically, from our outer world perspective, could mean that there's walking on the walls going on.
Yeah.
So you look
Wait.
at these. So funny enough, right? You see all these shafts that go all the way down, and they're like, what could possibly be the purpose of this? How could they possibly get down this? There's no stairs. There's no access. Well, what if the answer is simple as to what I'm saying? Well, once you get down to that point, there's a centrifugal bias rather than a gravitational bias. And therefore, what we perceive as something vertical that you'd fall down is actually nothing more than a long corridor for them. Could you imagine that? That's just a long corridor, possibly, right?
Maybe.
Now, everything I might be saying here might be total hooey. Like, I mean, I'm literally making it up on the spot, but seems
I'm
to
just
fit
trying
the
to.
bill.
I'm just trying to understand it. I don't. In any experiment that I've ever done, even if I take a ball and dip it in water and then I spin it, it still puts out water in a 360-degree sphere. But when I put it in flat, it literally just flies out the side. Okay, that's where it goes. So there's a geometry difference, and I'm trying to understand if there's anything that they could do, because they give you all these explanations that seem stupid to me. Okay, and I mean literally stupid. The Earth drops 6 inches for every foot, or something like that, right? And they'll say that continuously. Well, how the hell would you know? There's mountain ranges everywhere. You couldn't figure that out no matter what you did. Okay, there's no flat portion of the Earth. There's a problem with that whole statement. You'd be better off saying you took Viagra and then it fell every so many seconds per foot. You know what I mean?
Right.
Then I would understand a little more. But this isn't, this isn't that. I don't see a scenario where it works. That's the problem I'm having with it. So we know even if you try to break a compression zone in the center, right? So you put a dielectric in the center between the two flat plates, they're still not going to have that much adhesion to the surface, okay? Mild light or anything else. If you put a dome over top of it, how did you get half of a sphere for a dome? You know what I mean? And on the bottom part, if you said it went to a sphere over there, how did you get the spherical structure out of a flat one?
Well, this is so dumb when you think about what I was just saying mechanically. I just was like half listening to you and half just imagining something real quick.
Okay,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I apologize. All right, but if you think about like a rotary tool for a second, I think this is an interesting way to think about it, right? So if you think about a rotary tool that has like a flat disc that's spinning at a high RPM, right? Anything that's on top of that flat disc, like Nathan is saying, right, would get launched off. But what that made me think about was, well, screw looking at the flat top of the flat disc. What about the side of the flat disc? Like, right? Because that's where we would be in reality, and
we wouldn't be on the top.
Right. And then I was like, so what would the forces be like when you're on the side of this spinning flat disc? It's got a little bit of width. There's a side to it, Well, it would be continuous G forces. G forces. G, G, G.
Mm-hmm.
Gravity forces.
No, I
Gravity
get it.
forces. So it's crazy. You go from this
You
whole
walk on a straight line around the planet. Yeah.
launch off situation, but then as soon as you put yourself on the side, all of a sudden you go from being pushed out to continuously being pushed forward or back. And it's that continuous push of forward or back rather than out. Okay, that is the difference between centrifugal force and the centrifuge and gravity. that is literally the difference. And it would be just the continuous momentum change. That's mechanism at that point, right? So anytime you have a slight change of direction, in motion, there's going to be a force applied, and that force applied is the gravity. That's the gravitational relationship. What's deterministic of that? Well, size and rate of rotation, right? So if something that you're on is large, and the rate of rotation is therefore fast because you are on the outside. So remember, the further you get away from the center, the faster something travels, right?
Okay.
Like actual speed wise. Well, when you take those two things and plug and play, you realize that your G force would go up. Isn't that what you experience?
Okay, hold on. So, have you ever taken like a disc and taped something to the outside of it, just on the disc portion, and then spun it?
You mean the outside of the disc portion?
Yeah, just on the edges, just something on the edges, and you taped it to it to see if it would hold.
Well, yeah, it's far more stable than anything that you're going to try to adhere to the top.
Well, I give you that, but it goes in the same force as it does the top. It doesn't stick to the side.
No, it doesn't. The only reason that you think that is because it'll reach G-force failure, and as soon as it's broken from the side, then it has the rotational force that it's subject to, and the bias that exists when it fails, okay, is ultimately the starting point of its departure. So something would, it's still whipping around, it's starting to tear or whatever off. All of a sudden it tears off. It's got that rotational force stored up in it, and then it rotationally flings off
Mm-hmm.
because it's rotating. But that's only in the context if it fails. If you put something that is small on it, like it's going to be far less likely to leave the surface, that from the side as it would be the top, I believe. Unless if in the closer to the outer edge of the top of the plane of this rotational vector on the top, the greater that force would be, so the more likely it is to then be flung off. That's what I think. I don't know.
All right. I don't think that there's a way to make flat Earth work.
No,
I'll just say it.
no, it's a bunch of bullshit. It always has been.
Yeah,
I don't understand why people think that. It's people love a good story and conspiracy,
Now, I'll say this: if you were, I want to say it. Say we were in a different time, and in that time, everything was frozen around us. And if we went to the far left, there was ice. If we went to the far right, there was ice. If we went to the top and bottom, there was ice. Then I would conceptually understand your point of view that flat Earth would be 100% real to you because there's nothing but ice all around it, right? And then you go, well, the only zone that we can walk in is this little portion that seems flat to us. The river's flat, the ground's flat, the mountains go high, but there's, the rest of it's a plain. Then I would understand it. And I guess conceptually that's the way that they see it. The problem is we're not in an ice age and we know better.
Yeah. We're not in an ice age and we do know better. I mean, I think that it's very amusing, some of the arguments these people come up with. I mean, so like if nothing else, it's like, man, you just won't accept reality and know for an answer, so you come up with all these why nots and how you can'ts, and some of them are fun and kind of make sense, but it's like being a good lawyer or something. You could always look at the situation and try to justify it, based on things that we could all agree on. Like, isn't that
Mm-hmm.
isn't that how that works? Like, it's
Exactly how that works.
it's exactly how that works. It's like, oh, well, you agree with it in this context, huh? Pot call the kettle black, hypocrite, that sort of thing. No, like it's they make some good arguments and stuff, but that doesn't make it any more true. That's for damn sure.
Okay. So let's go on to the second one. Let's look at a toroid. Okay. And hold on, let me just go back to flat Earth real quick. I think a lot of people because of the way they do space-time and the way they present it, okay, that they completely believe flat Earth is real. And I'll tell you why, because they think we live on a grid structure that's flat. And this is what screws with people, okay? It's not a flat grid structure, it's a full grid structure, an X, Y, and Z axis. If they didn't put the Z axis, they'd be laughed out of science, okay? Let me just tell you that right now, okay? When you only think of X and Y and you go like this and you go, man, we're on a grid, and then everything populates on a grid, it screws with people's minds. It makes them think, hey, flat Earth is real. If we live on a grid and everything populates on a grid, and then we make our warp bubble like this on the side of a grid and we ride a wave on the grid, then we must be on a flat Earth, right? That's got to be conceptually right.
All right, so check this out. If you just want to say, if you want to give credence to the fact that to what I just proposed, which is that centrifugal force and gravity have a direct correlation and would disprove flat Earth. If you're a flat earther, you just turn around and be like, so who says it spins around and we're at the top? Who's to say that we're not doing a flip flop? You know what I mean? Like, so the flat of the sphere is what's turning rather than it turning flat on a disc, right? See, because then the vectoring is correct for them to have gravity. This is what I'm saying. You could come up, you could sit there and use like what I'm making, which is a valid, good point, right?
Uh-huh.
Something that's probably like it's at small scale observably correct. All right. But then you could sit there and take it onto this big scale and just be like, well, okay, so change the axis point of rotation. There you go. Bang, all of a sudden it works.
Well, I think one of the, I'll say it again, and I know this is hard because when you look at science, they don't use the z-axis very much. I don't know if you noticed that. They use T1, T2, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, they like the equivalent of a Venn diagram, but yes.
Yes. I think it's hilarious. So I think that's part of why people get all screwed up. They think, well, science is on my side here. It's really not, you know what I mean? And science did it right. But they seem to think this because every time I see a science thing, the first thing I see is, okay, let's make a gravitational bubble. And the first thing this moron does is pull out a grid structure, a flat grid structure, and says, look, we're riding on this grid, right? And then everybody and their mother starts to think, hey, there's a flat space behind us, right? Somewhere. But there's not. It doesn't, space doesn't work like that. Space is an open thing. You wouldn't know if you're upside down or not in space. Okay? You'd have no understanding of it.
All right, so I'm gonna say something that I feel like I believe, but like this is out there, man. This is out there. All right. Your standard old sine wave, your AC sine wave. Okay. It has a gradual fluctuation up and down, right? Does it not?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I think I know what's going.
Hold on. What happens when you take it off of the 2-axis measure? Well, what you end up realizing is that there's really no gradual amplitude fluctuation, that there's a dimensional differential, and that it's actually phasing out the proportion of the exchange upper dimensionally and then re-entering. Oh, what about that? So every time it goes up, okay, it's coming back in. And every time it's going out, it's cutting back out portions of it till it reaches its least amount point, and then comes back. And guess what? Realistically, it's on the other side of Planck's scale, because if you look at it, there's no actual fluctuation to give a frequency definite, right? It's just a constant high and low state of amplitude potential, positive and negative of your differential. And you actually have a geometric dimensional phase shift that's occurring over time, because time is the mechanism of that exchange. Whoa, what the hell did I just say? Well, what I just said is that a sine wave is legitimately just a geometric dimensional transfer that's occurring with the mechanism of it being time as a byproduct. Okay. And because of that time, you could observe the phase shift up and down, which gives you a pretty little up and down wave. What about that? It's crazy because all you have to do is add the axes to the graph. It's all you have to do. Once you add something going in and out, okay, to your cross, well, all of a sudden you see where that phase is going. It's just exchanging.
Well, the whole, oh my God, get me started on the oscilloscope. The whole problem with that is it's not dimensional and it screws up everybody's thought patterns of actually how energy works. So if you were to take just a straight cylinder or a wire, if you want, and put a half bubble on it, and then spin it around it in one direction, then you would have more of a better understanding of what's going on than you do on any oscilloscope that goes like this. We get lost in a wave pattern, but when they start describing things as waves, they're way off on what they actually look like. You you may think it looks like this on your oscilloscope, but it's more like dropping a pebble in a bowl of water, and then they come up like this. You know what I mean? And you say, well, Nathan, if you cut it from the side, it's the same thing. It's not.
So
It's literally not.
The proof of what I said is wild and out there as it sounds is actually already there in known science. Is like everything I say because I correlate it based on what we know, but we don't say it the right way all the time. So we know that these energies, anything that we're detecting as just a basic sine wave, okay, on an oscilloscope, we know that it's caduceus in its nature, okay. Another word for caduceus is helical, right? It's a helix. So what you start to realize is that you're only picking up a portion of the helix. The portion of the helix that you're picking up is the phase, the gradual phase in and out that it's passing through that sensor line, okay? And the measure is of that sensor line. But what you end up realizing is that when you look at the helix, okay, it maintains its diameter, okay, which is directly correlated to what we perceive as the frequency. However, because it preserves its diameter, that means that its power, its energy potential is always the same. The amplitude is always the same. Okay, it's just that amplitude is phasing in and out. And
I
it's
don't know that the amplitude's always the same.
Well, if it's okay.
That's a condition that was something else.
When it's passing through and it's giving you the sign, it's not. Okay, because that's what we observe, and it's not. Okay. But if you back up and you see the whole picture and you understand that the movement is not like this, okay, it's like this. Okay, and you're only getting the reading at the center, basically, or at a certain point. Okay. What you end up realizing is that what is deterministic of the amplitude that you're observing is the maximum's extent at any given time of the diameter of the helical trajectory. Okay. But the thing is that it's maintaining that diameter through its helical it's traversing in that fashion, right? So that means is that if you stop looking here and you have a lower than maximum amplitude reading on where you pause time, right? Well, if you actually just back it up and look over here at the same exact point as at the highest point, just somewhere else. You see, it's always that diameter.
It's always that diameter at a set volts and amperage. Yes.
Right. So that diameter is deterministic of what the frequency is because the smaller the diameter,
yes,
the faster the frequency.
But I say the condition because you have to verify the volts and amps to get that height or to keep that same diameter going.
Yeah. Or I should actually say there's a direct correlation. It would be the higher the frequency, the lower the amplitude. Because there would be a direct correlation there.
No, higher the frequency, the higher the amplitude goes. the higher the voltage goes, the lower the amperage goes.
Hmm. I mean,
Because
I know that to be like empirically true, but like I'm just trying to figure out how that correlates because you
well,
know.
the frequency controls the volts in any system.
Well, I know that.
It's the
Yeah, no,
rise
there's
and
no correlation.
fall.
Yeah,
The so if you just want to calculate the amps, you'd use a pulse, which they do in DC. That's what they're doing.
right.
They're not calculating the voltage. The voltage is the height.
Yeah. Oh, anyway, there's a direct correlation to what I'm saying. The point is that if you look at it as like just an MRI slice of what you're seeing, you
Mhm.
realize that where it is at some other point is always going to be um at the same point that it is, just somewhere else. So that we would see that somewhere else as time, right? But we know that it's actually in that motion. That's just what's interesting about it. So you know, it's an observer situation because what you would get out of that is dependent on where the measure is taken. Because let's say that you have a native waveform, okay, that you're only capturing a part of. If you're only capturing the outermost parts of it, you might not even have enough to complete a full sine wave. You might only have a pulse at that point. So what does that say about it? Oh, you know, what does that sound like? What happens when you only catch an energy potential at its outermost point? Because if all energy is born of the same, even when it's different, well, that kind of explains why DC might act that way. You're just not picking up the center of the waveform. That's why when you compress it, you push yourself, you change your perspective, and collapses into AC. Then you see the whole thing. I
Wow.
don't know. I mean, listen, it's an out there subject. There's nothing proven, but I've said a lot of things, and I would say prove me wrong.
Well, they actually have, just so you know, they have math that describes the function of a sine wave over a square wave and exactly how it propagates into the changing of the frequency of it, even though they say there's no frequency. It's an ironic thing when you look at it when they tell you a flat answer on Google. No, there's no frequency in it. Well, how do you change it? You put a sine wave in and put frequency into it. But how does that change it? It just moves the thing up. Oh, by the frequency. Okay. So anyway, get past that. Let's go back to the toroid. I'm trying to make a point here, Joe, in pointing these things out because there's an absurdity in physics. People think things are flat. People think things are toroidal. Okay, they think that's how nature works. So I just want to explore the idea because it's going to come down to a simple truth. Both of them are full of shit, and I know it. And anytime you do the math on it, you should know it too, unless you were convinced by the flat grid, unless you didn't know how to use a z-axis, and,
Mhm.
and let, you know, unless you didn't understand, like you were saying, in a motion around something, then you think everything's fucking toroids and flat and everything else, right? You don't
Well,
understand what things really are.
well, isn't it funny that they say that there's 26 dimensions of space?
Which is
Okay,
just stupid.
okay. But and then we talk about axes and we start from the very end at the, you know, X, Y, and sometimes if you're smart, the Z axis. And then it's just a little funny to think that the alphabet that we settled on, that was basically, finalized within hundreds of years of, or a couple hundred years of the science that followed, right? Um, has 26 characters in it, and we choose to represent it with these letters. you know, like what does that kind of say? I mean, there might
I,
be nothing there, but I mean, you see where I'm going. If
no, I
if
get
each
it.
if each axis is a dimension, and we name it with letters, and there's 26 dimensions, there's also 26 letters. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, it's like saying the number 137 and they wonder why it's special. I mean, it seems pretty self-evident. Well, could add the 5 if you wanted to, but I doubt they ever do. But let's uh let's look at the toroidal situation, okay? Because this one absolutely drives me nuts. Okay, well, more than the space time likes to, because and it's not the fact that the way they wrote it is wrong; it's the way that they show it is wrong. Is what really bothers me about it, because they devoid the z-axis in most of it, or they think it's just a hole. God, it just bothers me because there's a better way to do it. That's why it bothers me. If they just use regular, simple geometry. Anyway, it, let's just talk about the toroid for a minute. Is there a possible scenario that the Earth could be on a toroidal? Or
The
a
Earth is
toroid?
toroidal. Yeah, the Earth is toroidal.
Like the one they, like a donut. We're not talking like a big sphere of when it's toroidal a little bit. We're talking a donut.
No, not a donut, like the big sphere kind. And aside from it being a big sphere kind, it's evident that that's the case because look at the manifestation of our magnetic field. Those magnetic fields don't exist without those geometries. They don't exist without the flow of energy in those vector directions. And there has to be an inward and outward flow and inner geometries that share the space. And I say share the space because they don't really share the space. They're both, we've discussed that. They're both there and not at the same time, right? So, yeah, it's an interesting situation that exists. But as you know, with any magnetic field, there's a big difference between being on the inside and the outside, and what the relationship of both energy and matter is, depending on where how where you are relative to the magnetic field that you're in. And
Well,
that makes a big difference.
yeah, I'm not disputing that. I want to stick to the donut shape though, because
Okay, so tell me why.
okay, we can let the truth be told. It's the way the energy flows is more like a spherical donut, okay, but it's not a donut. See, the thing is, and this is the point I'm making. We're looking at something like this, okay? That the sides come in and go like this. They're not looking at it like this, okay? Geometrically, all plasma does is go in a sphere, okay? Plasma can't form a donut on its own. It's not physically possible, okay? They force it to happen that way, and it's because of the pressures you put onto it. So that's what I want to get at here.
Okay.
And
Well, you do
there's
have a
no,
point, by the way. Like, I'm throwing it out there
yeah,
because like the it's not one donut though. There'd be two donuts, and the way that they work, you can observe, and the reason you could observe it is because that's only a portion of the spherical geometry. It's your favorite one. It's the eddy currents. It's ever present and well documented and so on as far as what we believe is occurring in the mantle, of the earth. Is where your eddy current zone is. You have convection currents. Convection currents are directly correlated to the relationship with the poles in the equator.
mhm.
So, that's where your donuts are, man. And there's more than one because they have to be. They're rolling off of each other at the equator.
what what I'm trying to get at, I guess, with it, and I'll say this: as somebody putting the world in a donut shape, it drives me nuts in electrical theory. There's no chance you can have a spherical form in that. Even if you wind the wires, you still have a spiral, and it still goes one direction or the other. It's never a steady donut. Okay, and geometry matters in a lot of this, along with flat Earth and so we look at it. Without the spherical shape, there is no Earth. It doesn't exist, and it
Yeah.
doesn't have life on it. And I guess that's kind of, again, I guess we'll just skip forward to the truth. The Earth's energy fields look like a donut, but not the donut that you actually see. So what it would look like, and what we're describing is there's a center core. It would come up and then out and then around and then back in, right? So it would almost be like an apple, if an apple was round, or an orange shape. You know, the oranges slices come off like this and go back around the energy through the core. That'd probably be the best analogy of it, is an orange. That's
Well,
how
that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's how the energy flows, right?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is this: anything the same as with the donuts, like you're saying, the same as with what I was talking about before with the inside of a field, outside of the field. The same exact thing applies. Okay, and what you end up realizing quickly is that anything that's subject to the outside forces of your donut field, okay, turns parabolic. So it gets swept up, but then it doesn't get sucked in, and it gets swept up and around and up and around, and then it turns parabolic. And what ends up happening is once you have enough of a parabolic condensation, okay, it'll end up pinching. And then your donut always turns into a sphere anyway. That's how it goes. It might not be instant, okay? But it's not letting you get away with lacking that extra energy vector. What is that energy vector? I've described it many times, and I'm not a physicist, you know. Well, not yet, at least. I'm waiting for somebody to send me my, you know,
You know,
my
plaque for the wall.
yeah, my plaque for the wall. But the whole idea of it is that you get you can't have not enough axes, and then that's the difference with the plane, right? So that's the difference between a magnetic component and a magnetic field, right? Because anytime that you're moving the majority of it on a flat surface of a plane, which a donut would, okay, that's a magnetic component, and it's not true magnetism, but there's attractive and repulsive forces that could occur out of that depending on where in the field you are. See, that's but it's not it doesn't it's not subject to as much.
I don't like magnets in the way of the Earth. They don't that whole attractive and repulsive relationship is
Mhm.
not the right way to say energy and Earth. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
more like there's more energy on one side than the other, or something like that, because it could flip in between the two, depending on how you look at it. And I come from this perspective of, if you said that it's a bipolar testicle, it depends on where the number one coil sits on that actual coil. One side has more energy than the other, and they behave in a different way. One side's positive, one side's negative. But magnetically, as far as the way the magnets attract and repel each other, they don't necessarily work that way. It's like an
No.
open core system instead of a closed core system, where, you know what I mean? You get that heavy effect on it.
See, what a lot of people I think kind of miss the point, and this is one of the huge things with Rav, and what Rav kind of proves out is that you could have two things that would usually attract one another, okay? But as soon as and why would they attract? Is because they're opposites, okay? But as soon as you change the relationship, okay, and you have them headed toward each other in a in a parallel fashion where they're going to cross like this, but headed toward each other, okay, they no longer attract, they repel. Why? Well, because this going this way and this going the opposite way in the opposite directions is the same as two things doing the same thing in one direction. See?
Okay, but let me just say this. I think there's a missing component in the way everybody sees it. Okay? I think that there is a torsion field formulating in the center when you say repel, it's not as easy as they repel. I think that there's a field forming in the center that is torsionally active that has a spiral coming down to each side, and they meet in there, and they force themselves off the axis of center. Does that make sense to you? It's not that there's it pushes against each other so much. Is it that there's a toroidal field in the center not allowing them to push themselves together?
I mean, honestly, that's I agree with that entirely, because anytime that you have um, opposing forces that are actually working in conjunction with one another, rolling off of each other, you know, you're going to have your torsion boundaries. You know, and the torsion boundaries are interesting as they add to the system rather than detract. They add to the system rather than detract. It's sort of like, you know, one spins faster, so it spins the other one faster. And when that one's running out of gas, the other one's spinning faster and knocks the other one up. And it leads to a stability of the ambient average between the two. And there's very little losses because they're just simply rolling off of each other. And that's where the luminosity of it comes into play, for sure. So I mean, I tend to agree. And this is how you end up having vector direction, okay, that is manifest of certain electromagnetic properties. And then you can change the phase of the electromagnetism without necessarily interrupting the vectoring. You know, is because when you add the geometry into it, it's following the same line. So it's not getting hung up. It's not hitting resistance. There's none of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's changing what it's doing in relationship to the rest. So then it could go from having a magnetic component collapse into a scalar component, have that scalar component reach a point of interruption, and then bang, all of a sudden it's a current.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you look at it, the line has never done anything other than travel along its path, like unbroken in a good way like that.
Right.
It's breaking the path that's disruptive.
So if we put a torsion field in the center, now we look at the energy of the Earth and how we think it flows, right? So we see it as a sphere and we see it as the S shape, right? It just simply goes into how it directionally pulls in and then back up into it, right? So it's got to spin left and right. And while it's spinning left and right, it's got to go back up and into it, right? So that's why I say there's a torsion field in there, because it's pulling the energy that way. It's observable that we're getting it through the North and South Pole that way. One pulls in while one's pushing out. The more energy pushing out on the top, while the less energy is pulling it in on the bottom.
I agree, and that's definitely the way that you know, we've been describing it and everything like that. It's you know, it's dead on. I mean, what do we have here? Cellophane. If my visual is correct, then we don't need a 4D component because I don't use quaternions or 4D component access. I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess, but when you don't use a fourth dimension in these things, what you end up with is quantum mechanics and the whole idea that, believe us, these things happen behind the veil that you don't ask about, you know, and it's like, believe us, it happens, we observe it, but we don't know where it goes in between point A and point B. So we're going to say that it probably is there all along, but not, you know, it's like you just end up with a whole bunch of missing.
Well, here's the answer: balance unbalanced. So
Yeah.
without the 4D component, you have no balance. That's okay. So let's look at the actual magnetosphere of Earth. On one side, it's round. It's got like a C shape, okay, but on the other, it's not. It's like an infinity. It goes like this. It opens. It curls around and then comes back. The reason it does that is because the 4D component's over there, and it's creating a field for it to go around it. it recognizes it even if you can't see it.
Yeah.
The field recognizes it's there.
Yeah, so he's actually building on, and I like the points he's making, this guy, right? So there's that the poles connect through a spiral, like, and twist to a point, and he likes to think about it like a cone. And I mean, trust me, I agree with you wholeheartedly, 100% with that. Now, the thing is about the energy exchange of these types of fields, right? And you're talking in relationship to matter, right? And in this case, a planet, let's say, right? Um, you have these channels that you're describing. However, the channels do not necessarily directly correlate with the matter that they are subjected to. So, what does that mean? Well, I mean, what that means is that it is doing it and it's there and it's present. Okay. But other things are also happening too. And there's a non relationship between some of the things that are going on the inside of the Earth, let's say, that are observable, while this energy transfer is going on. Well, what that means is that it's both there and not there simultaneously. And the best way to think about it would be like a tunneling type effect. Okay. It's sort of like if I was to say, well, I'm the only one in this room right now, but in all actuality, there's somebody else in the room too. We're just not interacting with one another and we can't perceive each other or there. It's like a schizo or something, like something. It's like, right. Basically, adding in the fourth dimension is schizophrenic, but it's, but that's sort of why that dimension is actually necessary. Because what you would observe is what Nathan is saying about the donut and the convection of the eddy currents. You'll see that. Okay. What you're not going to see is the central energy exchange that's occurring. Okay. Because it's not affecting those other processes. Now, one does not exist without the other necessarily, not in its full values. But at the same time, one does not directly correlate with what the other one's doing.
Well, hold on. So let me speak on that for a minute.
Sure.
It has to go to a pulse, okay, between the two. Remember when we did the two rafts together? One would be bright and then the other one not be, and then they switch back and forth, right? What if we looked at it on a different scale? We see the 4D image and we see the 3D image, right? We see our Earth, we see the light image in the thing where it knows it's there, right? What if that's all it's doing is dimensionally pulsing between the two?
That's what I was saying. That's what I was saying about the waveform earlier.
Okay.
Dimensionally pulsing in between the two. It's just like if you look at us as a measure on a plane, right, like this, right, and our waveform is going like this, circle, right? Now all of a sudden, all you're getting is this high point, low point, and because we're three-dimensional, it's more like this. You're getting this variation that appears to be a variation of the amplitude fluctuating between a high point and a low point. But in reality, all you're doing is you're not seeing the part that's leaving the point of the hand.
Mm-hmm.
So you're only seeing the relative part that's inside the point of measure. And that's what I was saying about the sine wave earlier, and it sounds exactly like what you were just saying.
Yeah, well, it tends to act that way too.
Mm-hmm.
We see it all the time. Like in the center of the Earth, you say there may be only one sphere in there, but I'm telling you, there's a counterbalance to it somewhere. Okay, in some way, there's a counterbalance to it. Just like we see outside of the Earth when we see the whole thing built, and then we get the field that moves there. Like I said, you may not see the object in there, may not be visible to any light, but the field sure finds it. It knows exactly where it is.
Yep, that's for sure. And you know what? The fluctuations in the electromagnetic modes, right, changes the density potentials in relationship to matter in any given area. And when you increase certain potentials in relationship to certain types of matter, what you end up doing is pull more of that dimensional potential in. So then that's how you end up seeing fluctuations occur where you start bringing in more energy, or you start to get spikes and things like that.
Funny.
Yeah.
It's like it something they always talk about in physics. It's a mirror effect, and it's not a quantum mirror or anything like that. It's just like a mirror effect. Like it's seeing something on the other side, but the other side's like a two-sided mirror in the way that it sees it, because it's actually there, but it would look like a mirror to anyone else that just looks at it. So,
Hey
we can talk
Nathan, while
about
we
it.
have a minute,
Yeah, go for it.
do you mind if I plug the Tesla piece?
Yeah, let's pull it up. Give me one
All right.
second.
Yeah, you pull it up. I'll go grab it too,
Yeah, do it.
so you can see it in real time.
Let me pull this up for you guys here. Joe does a cool Tesla thing, man. The print. Oh man, you put a frame around it. Looks awesome.
Oh, okay, thanks. Uh-oh. Oops.
Oh yeah, show that thing. Let's put up yours because it's gonna be a much better image.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one I sent you last week is probably the cleanest image of it. But yeah, my God, the reflection.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you can see, this is it in the flesh. You can see how big it is.
Nice.
And it's a portrait of Tesla next to his huge bifilar. Got some sacred geometry in there, along with the Rodin, math spiral, and got his rendition of John Hancock on the bottom in silver. And there's a little custom matting that I did in there. It's like black on copper with brushed copper, so it adds a little pop. And there is 25 of these all together that I'm going to make. And there are 20 of them still available.
Oh, nice.
And we're going to be putting them up on Nathan's Shopify for $150.
I'm gonna pull this up for you, Joe.
Yeah, if you have the nice picture that I sent you last week, the reflection's killing it.
Yeah, that reflection sucks.
I might have to. I mean, it looks nice when it's hanging on the wall in person, but I might have to add an anti-glare coating to the frame. If anybody wants an anti-glare coating and they're going to order one, just let me know and we can figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, check that out, Joe. There's that picture right there for you.
Right on.
That's nice and clean looking. You can see the depth and everything.
Oh yeah, it's very like 3D looking. It's all original work. It's my own art process that I do to make it. It's not some bull crap, or like something that popped out of like a printer or something. It was just like that. It's real original art. Each one I'm doing from the ground up manually, and I think that it's definitely going to look nice in my office. I'm going to tell you that. So if you know anybody who either loves Tesla or maybe that person's you, if you're anything like me, think about maybe grabbing one, because I'm hoping that those 20 go. And once they're gone, if there really is that much of a demand, it's not going to be this design, because I'm committing to only making 25.
Very cool. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I love this. Change the way this thing works. Take down one thing, it's supposed to pop the other face, doesn't do it. Okay. Dude, that's very cool, Joe. I'm gonna add those on there, man.
Yep.
So I'll take all the pictures you sent me and put them up there, man. That's gonna be totally awesome. That I dig, man. That's something to put on the wall right there.
Yep, I got one for you.
Nice. Right on, man. Well, I hope they sell out for you, Joe, and a limited edition, dude. And it's very clean work, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for the support to anybody that is interested and buys one. We'll make sure that It's on the YouTube channel and posted all around, so it's clear as day where to get it. And next week we'll put the link up in the chat too. But they're here, they're ready to ship. And if you want one, I'll get it out to you. 2 shakes of a lamb's tail.
We ought to make a little commercial and play it during the middle of our, lives, so that people can see it. I think that'd be trick.
Yeah, it would be cool to show off some of the products that we have, just generally, this, but also the coils and the circuits and the t-shirts and all the stuff, and
Oh yeah.
show people all the stuff in action.
I've been kind of lazy about that, Joe. I'll be honest with you. I need to get back to work on that. So, because I got to link my t-shirt account to this, and then the circuits I haven't put up yet. Yeah. So.
I hear you.
Right on, man. Well, that's cool. Look forward to it.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we actually know probably a little bit more about gravity than most people would. In going back to the topic, Joe. So it's no surprise that you have to have 360 degrees in order to make gravity. I mean, does that seem like a shock to anyone? I mean, do you feel like that would be a surprise to anyone, that no matter what you build, if you try to build anything in gravity, to make the gravity, it has to be 360 degrees?
Well, it's true. You need something to be adjacent to the rotational plane. So you'd have to be on the edge of the rotational plane.
Now, I'll say this, and I think I hinted to it before. Can you have a gravitation on a flat plane? If it doesn't spin, then yes. If it spins, then no. Does that make any sense to anyone out there? Because the field on the outside spins, that's rotationally done. And it creates the compression needed on the inside. But if it's flat, okay, the metal's flat or whatever, can it still pull gravitation? Yeah, because of the outside field. If the flat part of it is non-rotational, that's where it messes up, because then you get into forces changing the outside of the field. Then it becomes a field that looks like a rounded and then comes out like this and then goes back in like this. It screws up the geometry of it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense to you, Joe?
It does. Yeah, no, it really does.
Because the spherical structure has to be on the outside. So if flat Earth was right, then the dome sitting over top wouldn't look like a dome. Is that? It's kind of hard for anybody to say that.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be a dome. It would be pushed out.
A donut
It would actually be a ring. It would be a ring around the edge where the condensate is.
Right.
Yeah,
a massive ring out there.
Right. And then because it's spinning, and then the mass differential's there'd be a pull and a hole to the surface, which is gravity, is it not? It'd be a pull and a hole. It's the same thing as what I said about the eddy currents earlier, right? You're on the outside of the eddy currents. Well, it turns parabolic. What happens when something turns parabolic? It pulls in, sweeps. Pulls in and sweeps. That's what it does. Right? And that's exactly what you experience. Further away you get, the less it matters, the less the relationship, right?
Right.
But once you get out of that parabolic sweep, then all of a sudden you're free of the gravitational relationship, at least at the small scale, right? There's still other relationships that exist gravitationally, like how things go into satellite orbit, because of those actually skin based on their mass, like at the highest, most limit of where they're not subject to the gravity. So they're basically just riding that plane. Yeah. And that's what keeps them in the orbit, is just that state of the differential where it starts to kick in. They just stay there. It's like locking magnets at that point, right? Where it pulls it in until it pushes it away. Well, that's exactly how things go into satellite orbit, because it gets pulled in until it gets pushed away, but then it does the one of these, the back and forth like this,
Mhm.
until it then stabilizes, and then that's where it is. Then if the force is pushed this way or that way, it just goes with that automatically.
Yeah, you would have to have rotational. How do I say this? I, you'd have to have rotational spin in a field to make something flat work, and the flatness part has to stay as steady as humanly possible in order for that to work. Any centrifugal force from that flat disk sends the whole system out of whack completely. It ruins the whole effect. So it no longer becomes a field force on the outside, it becomes centrifugal force on the inside. Okay. Which then dominates the outside shield, which then can no longer contain anything like it. So
Oh,
that's the only way something flat could ever work. And if you're saying flat Earth spins, then we're screwed on that whole subject matter. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's true. Well, if you think about why the sphere is so significant, it's because of the rate at which it expands in relationship to the axis, right? So if you think about the axis as a single point, everything grows out from that point. And then once you get to the equator, everything reduces until that other point on the other side. Now, if the relationship is like you're on the top of it, well, you slide down, but then it's kind of pulling you back up. It's like this downward, upward, that's an offset differential, right? And then if you were to try it, like, put that on a grid where they cross, right? Where you're falling as fast as you're being drawn back, right? At that point, that's your gravitational effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's just when you take these factors and you cross them, this is what you come up with. And this is why when you go up in an airplane and you're no longer relative to the Earth's surface, but you're still within the gravitational pull of the Earth, you're now relative to the plane. So if your rate of fall is a certain rate and the plane is able to match that rate of fall, well, that's your equilibrium at that point. You're weightless. You see, if the plane actually descends faster, then you experience G forces. Or if you're strapped in. If you're not strapped in, then you hit the ceiling, right? You see this in car accidents all the time and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like
Oh
that
yeah.
when people aren't wearing their seatbelt or whatever, right? So this is high school physics, but all of this high school physics explains what gravity is when you look at it in relationship to each other. And these are all things that we know goes. That's how they do these zero-G planes and stuff, is they know what the terminal velocity fall rate of a human being is, regardless, and they're able to descend at exactly that rate. And by doing that, you become weightless. There you go. It's because of the curve. So when you're stuck more to the surface, it's because the forces that are working against you have equalized with the forces pushing down on you. You cross those two; those are your two differentials, and that's your gravitation.
Okay, so let me say this because it's become important. The spin isn't free. Okay,
Mm-mm.
so when you assume the spin is free, you get gravitational forces that look stronger than they should be because you're artificially spinning something. Okay, and this becomes important on how fields work and how strong that physics measures them, because where we see a vacuum, when you spin it without the spin being free, physics doesn't see the vacuum so much. we see compression. Physics doesn't see the compression because their spin's free, right? Anytime you take a motor and spin something, you see it as free spin. Therefore, the things that are used to drive that motor are not accounted for correctly. Your counting's wrong. So there may be more things than just mass driving this, because when you say it's mass driving it, you're saying spin is basically for free, which
Okay,
you're
no.
not accounting for
So,
the other parts of it.
so the other part of it though is the energy exchange, right? So
Right.
whenever you have mass, right, and it's in an energy exchange, then there's manifestation of electromagnetism and all of its components. That then becomes mechanism for the spin, and the correlation between the spin rate and the amount of energy exchange in which occurs, okay, is directly then correlated to the mass, right? So that's how the mass gets tied up into it, is because the bigger it is, the more potential it's exposed to. Okay, but then also falls into this weird state of its spin rate and how fast it's going to spin. It's the exchange rate, like I said, that I believe is mechanism of time, and we know that time and its effect, okay, is what Einstein had from day one said is directly correlated with gravity. But in my opinion, Einstein got it wrong. It's not that time is distorted, it's that time is emergent of the exchange.
Yes.
Okay. It's emergent to the exchange based on the exchange rate. Okay. And so is gravity. So therefore, there's a correlation between the two. Okay. But it's not because this, then that. It's not that. It's because of the exchange, both of them. And that's really it. So how do you turn it off? Right? Well, I mean, you turn it off by changing these numbers of
So
the exchange rate, relative to your locality.
I got a question for you then.
Mhm.
Is what we know as mass, rock, stuff like that, okay? Does it make gravity less or more? If you say the other side of it would be plasma gas, things like that.
I mean, that's hard to say because there's certain types of materials, right, that are um, much more capable of locking up energy, right? And if you give credence to what I've said about the relationship of matter and energy, and how energy is always trying to return as much matter to an energy state as possible. That's its entire goal. That's why all the magnetic effects manifest, is in this effort to bring it back into an energy state. Okay. But matter is tricky and locks it up. Right. So we know that certain types of matter lock up more energy than others. Which is interesting because, like, when you think about it, you have like conductive metals and stuff like that, and you would say, well, I mean, that must like lock up a lot of energy then, but it doesn't. See, that allows for the energy to become transient. It'll store a certain amount up to its capacitance. Okay, but ultimately, it's just allowing it to be transient. See, the stuff that really locks up energy is anything that's it has to do with hydrogen, or is a derivative component of hydrogen. That's why water locks up so much energy, is because the oxygen just literally traps the hydrogen into a state where it's stuck in a cycle of, if it breaks and it doesn't escape and return to an energy state, the easiest way is through combustion with more oxygen, turning it back to water, locking it up even further. And as long as the oxygen is hooked up to that hydrogen, it's that all that high potential energy matter is like, locked up. So you have a lot of energy that gets expended externally, okay, and will bring and draw in more and more energy to actually address this water situation. That's how that goes. Like, and when it's in a liquid state, more so. When it's ice, less so, because it's actually so locked away at that point that it doesn't see it as pure potential. So it's less likely to actually go after it so vigorously. But when it's in a water state, it'll go after it because it knows that it's able to evaporate it and bring it one step closer to possibly coming back to a full energy state. But all this energy is exhausted in this exchange through this, because that's the offset bias that exists.
So hold on real quick, Joe, before we go any further. I want to thank Darren for gifting an old man Bill's membership, dude. Totally awesome. And then
Hey,
he turned back
Darren.
around and threw a
Good man.
$10 sticker on there on top of it, man.
Woo.
Thank you, Darren, very much. Like Ani said, man, old man Bill's brought to you by Darren. That's right.
That's it.
Taking care of us.
Yeah. One of the most generous people on YouTube, brother. I appreciate you.
Totally taking care of us. Thank you very much, Darren. So I think honestly, the more mass something has that's qualified mass, or I would say not qualified, that's something that we would recognize as mass that brings extra weight. Maybe weight's a better way to say it. It slows down the gravitational effect. So the energy is being used up in spinning that thing. So it has a less of a gravitational effect where, say, Jupiter is mostly gases and plasma, so it can spin much faster, you know what I mean, without anything slowing it down. So its gravitational pull may be higher. The sun, no real mass there, right? Gases, plasmas, so things like that, you know what I mean, has a higher gravitational pull to it, okay? It can grow in bigger sizes, things like that too. So I think the less mass on an object, but the more gases in the size of the field helps in gravitation.
Well, if you think about it, most of the matter that has the highest energy potentials, okay, are also generally pretty damn volatile. And what you end up seeing out of that is super interesting, because then it tends to be organic, which isn't that crazy that the energy, right, has interacted with the matter in such a way to animate it, to actually bring the two together to lead to the most volatile, high energy substances that we know. And what do we know about these organics? Oh, they're all light. They're all super light compared to the pure form of the constituents. It really is. And it mostly is water too, because the water is what holds it all together. It's just very interesting to think.
Yeah. Well, I'm on the same lines with you, Joe. I think that's why we're seeing more gravity out of gas giants than we do out of ordinary planets. And then we'll probably see even a higher gravitational effect the more moons they have. And there's a correlation going on throughout the universe. I just say, just watch out when you get to gravitation and you always say it's mass. Just remember that there's an energy source moving that. It's not a drill moving that ball that they show you in physics. Because in that way, even if they calculate that, it's not the same as trying to make a motor run without it. I mean, try putting that motor in the center and trying to come up with some kind of different energy sources to make it run. It doesn't quite work the same.
Doesn't work the same.
But if you put a round in the center, you'd have
where it would work better. There's other circumstances where it won't work at all, which is interesting. Because if you think about it, whenever you spin a magnet, right, and it's in a coil, right, that fluctuation, the flux, right, is what is enticing a current state to occur, Well, that's because you have already a vectoring of energy stored up in these magnets. You're spinning them around. Well, what's that doing? It's opening up a well at that point, revectoring the energy and enticing it into into a conductor, and that conductor revectors it into a current state. It's just all revectoring of energy, and you need it to spin because you need the fluctuation. And without the fluctuation, it's just doing the skim job because of the dimensionality differential. So you need to bring it down in its dimensionality, and spinning does exactly that, because now you're taking upper dimensional geometries, okay, and you're inviting the multiple of them in on a plane, okay, which is able to create the fluctuation. So you're downgrading its dimensionality into a state that could then be captured and used. Everything just plays a role right into my theory as to exactly how these dimensional exchanges are it. That's the deal.
Yeah.
Why do you need to reduce a magnetic field's dimensionality in order to induce a current? Well, because it's like I've said all along, a current state is a two-dimensional, or I'm sorry, a one-dimensional. It's a one-dimensional component. Okay, so you need to bring it down to 2D and then capture it in a straight line in order to reduce it one extra. So you need to go from 4D to 2D and then bring it into a one-dimensional conductor for the one-dimensional manifestation of electromagnetism to be induced.
Yeah.
There you go.
Also, that motor's brute force.
Mm.
So the way we do magnetism these days in motors is just pure brute force. It's kind of, it works, but it's not something ideal.
No, and first of all, it could be modulated. It could be artificially modulated. You could have all the same fields running over very small currents, and then built multiplicatively to then have secondary rotational axes, and then pick it up inductively from there, and you'd be doing the same exact thing, except you don't have to move mass in gravity. So you do away with the resistance at that point, because magnetic fields aren't working off of resistance. You see why? Because they're higher dimensional. They don't have the same resistance. They don't have, their vectors are free of the matter. They're actually pushed out from the matter.
Yeah. Okay. So check this out, Joe. Something interesting about magnetic fields that people don't really understand. We judge magnetic fields based on your copper iron relationship, right? But what if you change the material? Does it still show up looking like a magnetic field, just a weak one?
Mhm.
But how many different kinds of metal are in the planet? How many things would be identified that could be magnetized?
Well, everything has a magnetic component, because the very bits and pieces that hold it all together are working off the same vector forces and energy potentials as above, so below.
No, I agree with that, but I'm making a bigger point here in that for every different material you run this through, the main energy source, it puts off a different type of energy that is more or less magnetic in its structure, right? So if you put it through silver, right, oh man, energy moves fast, not a high very amperage at all because it's not impeded. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You go gold, same thing, okay? But then you get to something like cobalt, okay? And you go, does it move faster or slower? Well, it depends on the temperature of cobalt. It moves very slow and crappy and cobalt, and then you cool that cobalt down, it becomes superconductor, okay?
Mhm.
And I say this for this one reason. people always continuously think everything's magnetism, but they don't understand the structure of magnetism to understand that. Everything puts off somewhat of a magnetic structure to it, but it's not in the same phase. And phase is probably a bad word for this, okay? But every one of them puts off their own dimensionality, and you can't line up the dimensionality to get it to work in magnetism. Otherwise, you could throw a magnet out in the air and it'd float, right? But the reason it doesn't float is because there's so many different forms of energy that are produced based on the materials being used in the earth that it'll never match up. Okay. It'll never give you that more than one little effect. So you say, I drop a metal ball and I drop a magnetic ball, right? Well, the magnetic ball is going to drop a little bit slower. And we all understand that, but not much. Okay. So you're not getting into that field and contacting the field the way you want to because you're not understanding what's going on here. You're not getting the energy source you're getting to. So, how do you change something in a nature where you can't produce the energy sources around it? You fix the function of it.
Well, it all has to do with the chemistry and the molecular structure of all these things, like the actual geometries, have direct correlation with the electromagnetic effects that it has, and what it wants to do at any given time. Because what you end up realizing is that there's certain materials that, regardless of orientation, okay, want to give some kind of energy potential, okay, or take energy potential from something that has a powerful enough magnetic field. Okay, I'm not talking magnetic component, I'm talking magnetic field. Well, once that realization of this energy exchange is realized by either the material or the magnetic field, there's going to be the attraction event that occurs because it's going to pull it in to be able to complete that exchange as readily as possible. Whereas in other cases, you know, they are incompatible with the exchange. It's basically the same as two things skipping off of each other, you know, that are going like slightly like different directions, right? You know, it's like go boom and they skip off of each other, and it's just in a constant state of skipping. So they'll actually like still have like a attractive force in the sense of check the other out. But as soon as it hits that point, it's like nope, incompatible. Then it doesn't want to push it out. This is happening at every single level. You know, it's why some things combine and other things don't, you know, chemically. And it has to do, you know, with the orientation of the matter.
Okay, so check this out, Joe. I'm trying to get to this. This goes to field coupling versus how much energy is there, right? And this is why it makes a difference. If all the energies are different, there's one common source of how it works. Okay? What waveform did you put in? Okay? How did you pulse it? Okay? Remember when we were looking at those waveforms and we said, okay, this is AC, but this is DC? And then we look at it and go, this is pulse DC. Okay? And you start going, man, there's so many different things in here. How do you know the difference? And then you oscillate them and it shows you the difference, right? What if I told you the only way to control any of this energy inside the earth is to never how you produce it, because you'll never produce the same energy it does. It's how you, on the backside of it, work with it in order to incorporate all of it. So if it's all based on a pulse rate, if it's all based on a waveform, right? How do you control it then? Well, then you create those waveforms and you align them, right? So when you say to me, well, Nathan, that's harmonics, okay? That's the sound, okay? You get into those things, well then now you're manipulating the energy in the environment based on those conditions. But what does that mean? It means that you're doing field coupling. You're coupling to the fields that are already in the environment based on the structure that you're putting them at. So the resonance, the sound, the vibration, the harmonics, all of that matter more than the amount of energy, because you're in a sea of energy. You're just looking at how to manipulate that energy. Does that make sense to you?
Oh yeah, it absolutely does.
That's what
Yeah.
people miss. They think that they can create 1,000,000 volts and make it something lift. That's an ignorant way to look at it, because you're never going to get there.
No.
If you use field coupling, you can use 12 volts to pull off the same effect.
See, what's what's strange is that, like, if you start thinking about gravity and time being related, and then you realize that a lot of the problems that we have are Earth problems, right? There's a lot of other planetary bodies out there, let's just say, right, that have much lower gravitation, which would directly correlate to a much lower rate of time dilation. Um, all of a sudden overcoming those boundaries, the boundary conditions of the ambient environment, right, to be able to break the locality become a lot easier. So right off the bat, if you want to do it boom tech way, right, you use like a rocket, right? Well, you know how much rocket fuel and thrust and energy it takes to get something off of Earth. Well, then look at that direct comparison to what it would take to lift something off the surface of Mars or the moon. Much less energy needed, because the differentials are just simply that much lower and different, right? So just to overcome the ambient is a lot less. That's where the Schwinger limit comes from, right? Has to do with overcoming the forces at hand. But what I find interesting is that most people, when talking about the Schwinger limit, they talk about what it would take to counter the forces. So it's like saying, okay, how do you, if you have somebody pushing on your hand, right? Well, to keep them at the same spot, you need to push at least this hard, right? Now, to push them back, you need to push at least that hard and then harder, right? And everybody thinks about it in that way. But what if the answer is simply to let them push as hard as possible so the acceleration happens the other way, and then you break the relationship because they go flying off the map?
I
You see?
never knew they looked at it in an opposing way.
Well, I mean, right, because it's about countering force as opposed to working with force. So
That's what they
that's
think
what
it is.
I'm pretty sure that, then correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but the Schwinger limit itself, I'm pretty sure has to do with the, overcoming the ambient forces. And how do you overcome the ambient forces? Well, you do it by working against it. It's
Well, that never made any sense to me. I always thought, Joe, when they start talking about this, they're trying to spin mass, okay, in order to break the Schwinger limit, and I thought that was completely stupid.
well, right. It tends to be, right. So if you have something clockwise spinning, right, and it's spinning clockwise at 100 RPM, right, to have something in the center, okay, that is not spinning at all, right, you would have to spin 100 RPM in the opposite direction.
They don't. Wow. Okay. They don't know how
So,
torque works then? Because as soon as you start spinning one thing super fast in one direction, the thing in the center automatically starts spinning the other direction. You know that, right?
of course, yeah.
So doesn't make any sense for the Schwinger limit to push against it. It naturally is going to fall the opposite way.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's my misunderstanding in this case, and I'm not immune to that. I'm just trying to say that there's two ways to think about it. One is working with the energies at hand, and rather than looking at the ambient as, your zero, right? You actually look at it for what it is relativistically from an external viewpoint, which is, okay, our rotational rate at this place, at this space, etc., is this. This is already what we're doing. Now, if you look at the forces that we're going to apply, we're going to apply them in this direction at this rate, okay, which is actually going to then move it further because you already have these other forces at work. So it's basically like the difference between throwing something against the current and something with the current, right? If you throw it with the current, it's gonna go faster, right? If you throw something against the current, it's gonna skip higher. See the difference?
Okay.
It won't, right? So it'll go faster and further if you go with the current. If you go against the current, it'll go higher.
Okay.
It's just how it goes because it gets thrown off.
So funny how this works. Okay. You spin something one way, what happens is you create a field that goes around it. Everything in the environment pulls with it, okay? But what happens to that is you create a cross-directional flow right below it that pulls the opposite way, okay? So your arrow alone will be able to drive it the opposite way. But you can look at it as two pressure forces, okay? If you want to, they'll always go opposite one another in that field zone, okay? It's just like the center of the earth. You create a band in the center where it's almost, not moving a lot, but on the both sides of it, they'll counter torque to each other, okay? And that's the way the thing's going, right?
Yep.
What I see is that they're not saying is that all has to do with pressure zones in gas medium, not in the metal that you're spinning in the center.
Yeah.
I think
Hey,
it's
You should
if
see
they're
what Grayson
saying
in the
it.
past saying.
Yeah, I'm reading it. If they're saying that the metal's moving and they're breaking the Schwinger limit, they're absolutely insane. If they're saying that it's the gas plasma on the outside, then they're 100% right. That's the 100% correct way to look at it, because you're not spinning the metal that fast. You're not spinning your craft. You wouldn't even live through the experience. It's kind of ignorant to think about. You'd have to think about it in the pressure zones and things like that, and creating the cross zone that it will actually do, and it will take things and rotate them in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Yeah. What Grayson in the chat was just saying, which was, you have a problem because you're using an axial drive with the ratio of 1-to-1, right? And then he's saying that you're having the same problem as a helicopter. Axial drives suck. Yeah, I agree. And this is the problem with the gravity flyer, and that's what I proposed as well.
It's not a 1-to-1 ratio, though.
Well, nothing is necessarily a 1-to-1 ratio. It's all relative to the surface area of a plate, which is a plane. So it would be subject to pi. And because it's rotational and stuff, it's a relationship between pi and phi squared. But to digress from that momentarily, is it has to do with the orientation, which was my a point that I had made a while ago, where I proposed, right, that if you just actually adjust or allow for the rotation of the graviflyer in that instance to adjust for the North Pole in the relationship to the fields, the external fields, now all of a sudden you've made the field parallel, okay, and they would be able to work without fighting them, but fighting itself over. Same reason that the graviflyer would sit there and start to do the thing where it's about to lift, but instead it flips. Well, it flips because it was starting to break, but once it broke, it was off canter with the rest of the fields. There's a bias on one side, and it causes the opposite to occur. So when your gravitational point changes from downward center of the craft, right? When it changes, it moves out, and then all of a sudden your heavy point is on the opposite side and it spills. So your center of gravity, it changes your center of gravity. So when you start bringing the center of gravity up toward the middle of the thing, as soon as your center of gravity is actually in the middle of whatever you're doing, now you've broken locality. And that's the whole point, is you want to move it out and draw it in, right?
No,
And
I
that
understand.
flip is the point of it. But that's actually kind of what he's saying, because the helicopters need to compensate for that difference all the time, because they can't sit there and fly parallel to, which is why helicopters have problems that prop airplane don't, right?
I'm aware of that. And there's
Yeah,
different motor speeds, right? Okay, so the center of the mass of the gravity flyer is on the bottom dish where the magnets are. Okay, that, that it's not in the center plate. I hate to tell that to anybody, but that's the actual truth. That's where the centrifugal mass or centrifugal force happens, is in that bottom plate. Number two, the bottom motor spins at maybe a third the speed that the top motor does. So it matches how gravity is actually working in the fact that the center of gravity should have a slower rotational mass in it, okay? And it'll spin faster on the outside. So it's working properly. The field's built that exact same way, okay? And you can measure and put the light bulb out there, they'll measure the exact same way. It's not the problem in that. It's the amplification factor in what you're doing and how you pop a capacitor in this sense, or how do you make it flex but don't break? Okay, that's the problem in this whole system. That's the whole portion that nobody seems to understand here. They think that we're still talking about just spinning discs and stuff like that. Most of that crap is semi irrelevant to the whole problem here.
yeah,
The the entire problem is going from a DC field to a pulse DC field and understanding why you're doing it and what it's doing to the eddy currents and all of the energy sources inside the plates themselves. You see, you already have a directional bias going on by the distance you put inside the plates. So as soon as you change it from a DC capacitor over to a AC capacitor, then it automatically interacts with the aluminum and makes it jump in one direction. It already has a force bias in it. Understanding how to make each one of those energies work together is the hardest part of everything.
right.
Getting your getting the understanding of taking a Tesla coil, which nobody does, by the way. I just put this out there. Starting it in DC, creating a capacitance between two plates, and then flipping it to an AC and then hitting it as hard as you possibly can without it sparking over. Okay. You don't see any tests like that on the internet because they don't understand that that's a process that has to happen here.
Yeah,
Not just,
yeah, I agree. That process that you're talking about is important, because the DC is actually, it's not going away when it creates the AC field. You see, it uses the AC once it's established as a carrier wave. That's really critical to it being able to have a multi-vectoring capabilities that are able to have all the components of electromagnetism simultaneously through different parts of the field geometry. You have to be able to have them all in order, all the components in proportion, in order for these sorts of things to work. Now, I mean, Grayson does make a point that, anytime that you're trying to accomplish something mechanically, okay, it is an inherent flaw, because mechanically it's difficult to have that many axes that are adaptable. Okay, but as Nathan has said before, there's currently in progress somebody working on something for us that acts as a modulator. Okay, once you're able to both sense and modulate all the different parts of your system, then you're able to program it to sit there and hit certain patterns that you need, and you can easily start to cross thresholds through modulated current rather than uh, actually mechanically moving anything. So you could virtually move the field, at that point. And that'll be the difference between the gravifier and a solid state that does pretty much identically the same thing. And through that same type of modulation, you should actually be able to adjust what type of effect it's running a bias toward. So whether it's structuring and separating non-equilibrium states, aka a RAV, or and forming cavitation and stuff, containment, heavy magnetism, time dilation, breaking locality as far as the gravitational effects. Realistically, the proper algorithm is set to the right adjustments and stuff to modulate in these ways should all be possible once that's in play.
well, hold on. Let me just say this. This is what drives me nuts. You don't need terawatts. Okay? I could do it in 12 volts. Okay? 40 volts at max. Okay. The RPM on the motors is to set a relationship in a beat frequency. Okay? It's very clear when you do it with Tesla coils because there's such high power that it shows you very easily, but this thing shows you the same thing as well. Put the light bulb over the top, run the motors, okay, put the energy on the motors, you develop a beat frequency inside the light. It's pretty clear, okay? It is to set the beat frequency of the craft. That's what the motors are there for. They have a secondary function, okay? The secondary function is on the bottom. It has to move slower because it's the center of mass. On the top, it has to move faster because it's the opposite of that, okay? Also, it's the energy that they put onto them that means how fast they have to move. The energy on the top has to be something that can push it off of it, okay? It has to be a higher voltage, lower amperage. The one on the bottom has to be a higher amperage. You're looking for a energy that stays on the disc more than it flies off. The top one flies off like crazy. The reason for that is distancing in field geometry as you make your sphere, okay? As you make your sphere, you must create rotational speed difference between the inside and outside. That means that you're putting structure to it, okay? Once you put structure to it, it'll work in frequency in order to align the fields. Once they become aligned, they're no different than the RAV, okay, on the outside. They're going to give you 3 different ones. These ones are more spaced out than the RAV would be. RAV would be 5 kilohertz in distance apiece, okay? These don't have to be doing that. They can be a little further apart. Now, the whole idea is how fast can I get the fields on the outside to spin? Now, they will break the Schwinger limit, and they'll build in 3 separate ways. They're not all going to build to the left. One's going to build in the center to the right, okay, or be null. It's going to be, how do I want to say it? It's going to work just like the Earth and the fields around it, okay? But not just that, they're not just all in one direction like we think they are. Like you think they're like this. No, you have counter direction inside of them. You're literally creating the fields of the Earth inside this craft. That's your whole point. It's not the fields that lift it, though. The fields are one effect, okay? Completely one effect. It is the effect of creating a gravitational pull to the center of mass. That is the, hold on, I gotta say it. I gotta finish. So that's the whole idea of the fields. It's just creating that one spot, okay? It's a gravity well. It does not move. There's no propulsion to it at this point. It's
Right.
just a gravity well. It'll sit there and it'll show you absolutely nothing until you give it some propulsion. Okay, but it'll work perfectly.
So think about when you think about it again as a mechanical and hydrodynamic problem, okay? And you realize what it would take to break the locality. You just simply realize that it comes down to changing the center of gravity. Now, changing the center of gravity in anything is the same. It has to do with balance. Now, your balance of differentials, right, on either side of a pivot point, more or less, right? So it becomes then a geometric equation. Well, we know how the energies work with the geometries. And what you end up finding is that when you have a large positive bias, if you want to think about it that way, right, at the top, okay, it's going to draw in, okay, the environment and then repel it away when it gets inside the field. You see, because it reverses. Okay, and it does the same actually from the negative side on the ground too.
Okay,
It
hold
brings
on.
it up, and then what does it do? Hold on, I drew it right. So if you look in the middle, there's your little craft, and the dot in the middle is your little change of the center of gravity. Okay, and then what you see is it's bringing in the environment, right? Bringing in the environment, but then when it actually comes inside the field, it rejects it away because now it's flipped. It's no longer outside the field; it's inside the field, so it's rejected out. You do that top and bottom, and now all of a sudden you have a center of gravity, the center of yourself, okay, and your environment is being pulled into you and thrown away from you, okay, which breaks the relationship. And now all you have to do to move this thing around is change that center of gravity. Okay, so if the same way that you modulated your center of gravity to be right there, if you move it in this direction, it will go that way. If you move it in this direction, it'll go that way. You know, you put it down, it'll go down. You put it up, it'll, or vice versa. So anywhere that you put it relative in on an XYZ axis is exactly what it's going to do. And that's the whole point. But what are those? Those are eddy currents. Top and bottom, they're all eddy currents. What is it doing? It's bringing it in, crosses the field boundary. Once it's inside the field boundary, the relationship between what it brought in changes, inverts, and then it's put away. And then it continues the cycle, top and bottom, inverse of one another, with the same directional planes, though. You see, like they all have one plane in common, and that's up and, it meets at the middle and bends out. So the down goes down and the up goes up, but the down's going down and the up's going up, you see? So that's the commonality. That changes the dimensionality, changes it to a plane. So that's why it has the stability, because it's then gyroscopic. Just throwing it out there.
Okay, I'm not.
It's the same field that we've discussed 1,000 times, but that's how it's working. All it's doing is creating an eddy current, except in and out.
I understand there's eddy currents on the inside, and I completely agree with that. There's a trap field on the inside, and then it doesn't allow for anything. And see, here, I don't want to say this. It's compressing energy on the inside, which creates a force on the inside, which means it's different than the environment because an EM field is stronger than the gravitational field in locality, not in total, but in locality. So when it does that, if you use the correct energy source, and this is why it's very important to understand this, it'll hold in the energy. It won't let it out. Okay? So now all these things become important in what you're doing in eddy currents, in what you're doing in field population and things like that. The stronger you make the outside field, the more energy it holds in. Okay? You're continuing to fill this thing. I mean, you got to realize that you're not letting up. You're filling it continuously. The power is pulling from your battery and is continuously filling this. There's no equilibrium point there. So it's not taking terawatts of energy. And maybe you're saying it in a different way, but it's not terawatts. Okay? It is the understanding of how to couple your fields, how to create something that makes the bubble on the inside and how to fill it. You know what I mean? It's not how to match the energy of the earth. I'm not trying to match the energy of the earth at all. That would be ignorance. That is pure ignorance. That's, let me brute force something and put 1,000,000 volts in it and hope it lifts. Okay? That's just complete and utter ignorance. Okay?
Well, you do understand that that's exactly
That's how physics
Everything
sees it.
that's exactly what human beings have been doing since we've been creating anything that you know, like
Okay, but
in recent times. Everything is about been overcoming force by literally pushing past it.
yeah, but
That's been the train of thought, right?
they have no idea how crystals work or anything like that. Then that's probably why they have no idea, because it's about field coupling. It's about putting things in the right place. It's about matching fields in different layers in order to create something. It's not having to do with pure energy. Pure energy would kill somebody. Okay, that, you know what I mean. You're not even getting next to it with 1,000 volts in it. Okay, uh, at an AC, you're just toast. Okay, you have to use field coupling. You have to couple those fields. You have to create the direction inside the fields. If you don't create that, you have nothing. You have absolutely nothing. It will never work, ever. This is why it puzzles people, because they calculate, go, okay, what's the energy of the Earth? And then they fuck it up in the equation right then and there. Okay,
Mhm.
you have to create the zone where the energy stays inside of it. If you cannot create that, number one, the gravity flyer fails, and any anti-gravity craft will fail at that point, because you missed the entire point of the exercise. You did not understand it. If you just want to pour energy into this thing with a Tesla coil, you want to pour energy with a DC flyback, you want to try AC flyback, I don't give a shit what you try. If you don't couple those goddamn fields and make the bubble, you fucked it up. Okay? You absolutely did not understand what you were doing. And
So
that's the
so
problem.
the crazy thing is everything you just said, if all you do is build the bubble and then compress the bubble, then you have the wrath. Do you see the correlation there? Because
I
all it
told you
is
forever it's the
right,
same
right,
thing.
exactly the same thing. The whole point is that if you take the field that Nathan is talking about is not a small bubble, right? This is a bigger bubble. But now if you compress this and compress this and compress this and compress this and compress, and you make it into a smaller point, okay, where the density levels are through the roof, all you end up with is a stable plasma ball at that point that's in a state of exchange between the two things, and it's acting as a non-equilibrium ballast, more or less like a well, where it's literally just separating the differentials. Well, when I showed you the picture a moment ago, and there's a plus at the top and a minus at the bottom, which was representative of two differentials on opposite sides of each other, what is it that we're talking about? What do you see on the anode and the cathode side of the raft? And what do you see in the middle? Fact is, you see the glowing heart of the non-equilibrium balance machine, and that's really all it is. Now, if you take those two components and you put them on opposite sides of each other in a free area, and it's actually in relationship with a greater mass, well, then you kind of have exactly the same thing. It's just in a more compressed state. You do need the outer bubble, though, right, in order to be able to project the differentials in a meaningful way, to have the exchange externally as well as internally. And that's sort of the key, because it has its internal and external components. They're actually repeating and they flip. Okay,
Okay,
is the
so
point. They're
uh,
repeating and they flip, but they're still relevant.
let me say this. The energy, Joe, think about the Earth. Where's the energy zone at? It's you go into a higher voltage, the higher you get, right? Then it goes into a plasma state, and it's cold plasma that we deal with in the Earth. So where does that tell you the energy is? So if you said that it's going to take that much energy, the only way I'm ever going to agree with you in that way is in that zone. Okay? If you told me that the energy level in order to create the plasma state on the outside has to be this many kilojoules or this many joules of energy, I'm going to agree with you there. Okay? But inside the part that's inside the bubble, it isn't there. It's not the same as the field itself. So if there's three levers of field, there's going to be a spot in that part that's going to have a super high energy level. That I agree with, okay? Because that's the exact way the RAV pulls it out of it, okay? But in the inside, this, remember, we're building from the inside out, not outside in. So it's perceptually different than the RAV in that way, in that there is the area on the inside that feels like it's null. It's not, it's full of energy, but it's to the human observer, it's null. Okay. It's like when you walk outside, it's null. There's a ton of energy out there, you just don't feel it. Okay. But the outside of the field, where it actually goes into laminar flow, that's where you're starting to get your energy, right? That's where it's starting to pull it through. But even that seems to, level out and, get to a certain level and that's it. That's how you solve this thing, man. You don't need a bazillion volts to put into something. That's the wrong way to look at it. Your coupling produces the energy that you need in the coupling itself so that it's not in the environmental condition of the center of it. It's in the bubble itself. It's on the outside field. To nature, the way that this thing actually goes around, it's just like blowing a bubble in the backyard with your kids, okay? Go out there and blow a bubble. It builds a field around the outside and it goes wherever it wants, okay? Has no propulsion on the inside, just goes wherever you want. You say, well, that's because it's so light that it does that. Pick up an ant. He'll fall to the ground. He'll be pissed off and bite you. But he's going to tell you, no, it's not about the weight. It's about what was built. It's about the compression of the gases on the inside that caused it. You see, that's the whole difference here. We're not trying to match the energy of the earth inside the bubble at all. See, that could be relatively light. All you have to do is take the field on the outside and give it the energy. And once it has the energy, nature will take over and feed it. You see, you're not feeding the energy on the outside. You're creating the condition for the energy to be pulled in by the environment itself to feed the bubble. Okay? Biggest difference in the world. That's why it works with easy light propulsion, and it changes the way that everything is perceived around it. You now perceive it as it's moving into a different time. But the only way that that's even conceivably possible is the energy must be fed to it from the actual earth into the outside of it itself to go with the time dilation field that's going on inside the earth. You must couple it in order to do that. Okay? It's a problem that people aren't seeing because they haven't gotten to that level of the physics where they're playing with the energy in that way. They don't play with the environmental energy very much. They play with the amount of energy they put into it. That's the biggest problem in physics. You can't see it that way. If you dealt with crystals or something like that in the beginning, and that's where you learned how energy works, you'd be learning about resonance coupling, you'd be learning about harmonics, and how they actually build the bubble. That's the point. You know what I mean? You'd learn it from a different perspective, and once you do that, you'd understand why the energy of the earth feeds this thing. That's the point. You're just creating the condition in order for it to pull it in.
Yeah, it's that, and it gets interesting too because of all the shearing effects that occur, and the vortex clustering through the eddy currents that are created externally that actually add as like they work as external feeds, and they work quantumly, which is super interesting because, and I know people hate that word, but, they say it's quantumly. I'm here to tell you that it has an indirect energy transfer that you cannot detect. Okay.
Mhm.
So there is, a, basically energy wells and matter wells that exist in these field formations that are occurring virtually, okay, just on the outer reaches of the magnetic fields that are created, the bubble. Okay, so right outside your bubble are these eddy currents that form vortexes and clusters.
Mhm.
Okay, and they virtually are grabbing energy from your environment and storing them in a way that you can't detect, and then feeding it back to your craft or your the earth or whatever have you, okay, in a nonlinear relationship fashion through some form of inductance. Okay, and it's a scalar inductance. It's why they say scalar is, when you have a collapsed waveform and it's a cancellation, right? If it's canceled, you can't detect it. Well, it doesn't go away. Where did it go? Well, it just went to where it's going to collapse again into resonance and then become energy again. So that's what happens to it, is it ends up accumulating and then turning scalar and then having a direct feed back to Earth that isn't part of the normal geometry. And the same thing goes with your craft. The same thing goes with the wrap. The interesting thing with the wrap is you can see the damn thing.
Yeah. No, I
But
agree with that.
and Earth, they only discovered this fairly recently, within I think the last 10 or 15 years. Okay. And they didn't even hypothesize that this was going to be the case previously. It was as a matter of, doing other work, empirically proving things out, that they're like, wait a second, there's this thing that's happening, and it kind of fills the void here as to where this extra is coming from. And here it is. It's happening. This is how it happens. It's great.
Well, usually when there's extra energy, there's bad accounting. That's well, because we know all energy comes from the source, and then the source brings it out to everything and goes back to the source. Like if you got extra energy, you have bad accounting. I'll just tell you that. And I won't say it's a bad thing. If you create something that you think is over unity, I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong. It's more than the energy that you put into the system that you think you put into the system. I should say that. It's the more than the apparent energy you put into it, it'll deliver out of it. But it means that you didn't account for the energy of the earth in there. So it's just bad accounting. Does it mean that it's bad for you? Absolutely not. That means that you can take your system and run your house on it forever. It just means that you're pulling in energy from the environment. That's all it means. It's
Yeah.
it's a way of saying you have over unity without physics having to explain that you have over unity. You know what I mean? So physics can say, hey, I have accounting and says that there's joules of energy in the earth, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But that's what you're using the gravity flyer as well. Okay.
Yeah.
The trick to this thing is the hardest part is the propulsion method that they use. Okay. Because essentially the propulsion method that you're using in this craft is the same thing that you're using in a lifter. Okay. And I don't mean ion wind. If you think it's ion wind, go swirl your head in the toilet and come back. Okay. Because you're wrong. Okay. It's completely asinine for someone to say that. It is the relationship between the two and why it's pulling it up in the air. Okay. It's an asymmetrical capacitor. And as soon as you know that, now you're just creating vector direction inside of an asymmetrical capacitor. Okay. And
Yep.
that's as simple as it gets.
I've been saying it since like pretty much the exact day that I came on with
They
Nathan for the
patented
first
it.
time. It's an offset differential. Everything works off of offset differentials. Frankly, between me and you, and I said it, I was like, a regular, any kind of electrical generator that's driven by gas, like your 5-horse Honda, okay, or hydropower or nuclear power or any kind of energy generation in the common sense, working off of turbines and spin, right, is working off of 0 point energy. And everything that flies, whether it be a helicopter, okay, or an airplane, is working on anti-gravity. Okay, why? Well, because realistically it is, but it's doing so in such a mechanical fashion. Okay, and it's having to exploit other axes of motion as a contingency to the functionality. Whoa, what does that mean? Well, that means that you have to have, and think about a prop plane for a second with a prop on the front. Okay, you have to spin something this way. Okay, that's one plane, one rotation. Okay, that plane in rotation creates a second, okay, which is a pressure differential this way, front to back, right? which then splits it from front to back over the wings to top and bottom, the high and low pressure top and bottom of the wing. Okay. And then it needs the other direction of being moved forward at a certain rate, okay, in order to sustain that the high enough differentials in order to function. Okay. So that's exactly what anti-gravity takes, but virtually. Okay. So you need to be able to move something this way, to push something this way, to split it that way. Okay. And then have those numbers be high enough that it goes up.
Okay, so
That's
hold
the
on.
equation. That's the equation. Guess what? That's how an airplane works. So now, what does that mean when you take all those mechanical forces, okay, and you put that into context of only electromagnetism? Well, if you're rotating something, okay, but it's not spherical and it's on a plane, that means that you need a magnetic component. If you need something that's pulling in and pushing out, basically in one biased direction, that's scalar. So you're using a magnetic component to create a scalar. All right. And then what you're doing is you're breaking the scalar by splitting it. Okay. And then you're creating high and low pressure of the scalar. Well, what does that mean? Well, you need a current state to split out of the scalar. Okay. In on either side and opposites. Oh, wait, that's exactly what we were talking about has to happen in order for anti-gravity to occur, except all it's doing is looking at how a prop airplane works. And, you know, as long as those differentials are high enough to make up for the inertial difference, okay, that is required for an airplane to then lift off, right? So that's actually what you have to overcome in order to overcome gravity is the sum of all those components to create that differential. All right. And once you're able to create that specific differential, even if it's virtual, okay, you're able to then lift up without necessarily having to move forward. That's it. You know, like, but who am I? I'm just an idiot that likes to think about things in simple ways and use lots of words.
Let me make this very simple. The wire at the top, flat plane of aluminum. Okay, that's pretty simple, right? Create the energy going from the top to the bottom. Okay, create the eddy currents. Get exactly what Joe just said.
Yeah, and hold on. And Grayson, what he said, he didn't mean plane like a propeller aircraft. I knew that was my example. I wasn't caught up on that. I wanted to throw it out there. That's exactly what a fucking airplane does. Yes, it splits a scalar potential, okay, into two different parts, high and low, creating high and low pressure, and putting them inverse and then opposite each other, like that. And once you do that, then you have your lift. That's the point. So they split off into their own planes of direction where they're opposite, and then the wing, as you know, the wing shape, okay, ultimately is what mechanically creates that eddy current that are working in parallel planes opposite of each other, which then causes it to lift. You see,
Yeah,
that's it.
let me just say this, just so everybody understands a little bit more. Anti-gravity is a very bad word to use because it's not true. It's you're still creating propulsion, and it anti-gravity would assume that you're pushing against something, like two magnetic forces pushing against each other. You know what I mean? And then it propels its way up. That's the wrong way to think about it in all aspects of what we're doing here. Okay, so I just wanted to throw that out there, and it's one of the biggest things that'll get you screwed up when you're talking to AI or anything else, because it's not exactly anti-gravitational. You're creating a bubble, you're reducing energy inside the bubble, and then you're moving the bubble. So you're still having to create propulsion in order to do it. It's just a different type of propulsion. That's what we're saying. If you're using eddy currents instead of a propeller, it's just a different type of propulsion inside your environment. The only
I
thing that's
disagree. I
no,
disagree.
I'm sorry, but that's the way I
Because
see it.
because yeah, but I mean, but I understand it's the way you see it, but as a matter of non-opinion, the way you're
Matter
seeing
of
it
not
then is
opinion.
got to be wrong. Because here's the thing: the way that the propel okay, the reason that there needs to be the forward motion of the propeller aircraft, okay, to take off, okay, take off equal float, all right, but it doesn't seem that way because you need the forward motion. You need the forward motion because there's a certain rate that has to occur in that configuration, okay, in order for lift to be generated, as they like to put it, lift, okay? So, but they use thrust to achieve that certain amount of forward motion. So the mechanics of it, okay, create exactly what you're saying. They work off of the eddy currents because the foil of the aircraft wing, okay, is shaped in such a way to, to create, to separate the airflow, create high enough pressure differentials mechanically through the forward motion, okay, and then redirect them in such a way to cause eddy currents top and bottom of the wing that are parallel and opposing, okay, which is the creation of the lift. You see, everything else, see the forward motion of it that you would consider thrust needed, propulsion needed, okay, is only a means to an end to be able to meet the differential requirements of the wing to have the eddy currents at the right potential to create the lift. That's it.
Okay, so
So,
what are you arguing with me about exactly? Because it doesn't sound like you're using magnets or anything
so
like
it's not
that.
that it's propulsion. The propulsion's a means to the end of creating the high enough differentials in that case. The mechanism of the lift is the eddy currents. Period. So
Okay,
if you do away with thrust and propulsion altogether, and all you simply do is create the eddy currents at a high enough differential, then you still have the lift without the need of propulsion. And once that's created and it's sitting there, now all you need to do is change your relative relationship again by
but
changing the center of gravity because everything's flowing around you. You see, everything's flowing around you. That's what I drew. That's what I described. That's how airplanes work. So the whole point is that you need exactly that parallel eddy currents that are
okay,
inverse. Yeah. And it has nothing to do with thrust.
you're telling me creating eddy currents above and below gives you the ability to move?
It gives you the ability to lift. It's what an airplane does. Again, the only reason that you need thrust in an airplane to have liftoff and you need to maintain a certain speed in order to maintain the flight is because that's the means to the end of reaching the level, the differential top and bottom. If you're doing it electromagnetically, you don't need to move it. You just need to pick up how much is there, top and bottom.
But
That's it.
okay, when it moves, it's still propulsion. Okay, that I'm not disagreeing with the method here, Joe. I'm disagreeing with that it's not propulsion. Okay, that's the only
Well,
part. If it
what?
creates a direction and moves, it's propulsion. Now, it doesn't matter if it's eddy currents or non eddy currents or wind or the fart that comes out of your ass. It's still moving. Okay, so it's still propulsion in some way.
Well, I mean that depends. Is it objectively moving your ambient environment? Because if it's not creating environmental thrust, then I don't think it is propulsion. Because you're not using your environment to push off of. You're diverting your environment around you in order to achieve a state of suspension. Then you're changing your relative position in that suspension to manipulate your motion. So you're no longer propelling yourself through an environment. You're literally slipping through the environment. You're steering yourself through, slipping through your environment.
No, I'm not arguing what you're saying. I'm just arguing the simple point that it's still moving. Okay? However you do it in the environment or not, it's still propelling itself in one direction. I'm not arguing with how you're doing it or how you're saying it. I'm arguing when something moves, it must be propelled in some way.
Actually, I mean, what I think that when you take the inertial need out of it to reach the differentials, I don't think that's the case, because you've broken locality by having your environment slip around you. So now you're in between your environment. So you don't need you don't need to push against your environment or propel against your environment to move. All you have to do is shift your relationship with your environment in order to move. So it's not actually changing any forces, it's just changing a relationship. And there would be no necessarily push off of your environment, which would be, to me, propulsion. Like a propeller pushes against water to propel you. A propeller in an aircraft pushes and moves air to do the same. The rocket does the same, expands gas, and it pushes you against your environment that way. This doesn't push you against so it's not propulsion, in my opinion. It's your environment's around you. You're not in that environment.
Like I don't want to argue forever about it, Joe. I think it's a difference of it. I think it's a difference of opinion. I think your opinion is valid, and I'm not going to try to.
I'm not trying to understand it either, but it's nuanced, but it's important.
No, I understand that. That's why I'm trying to understand it. Because anybody that I tell anything that moves and I tell them it's not propulsion, you know what I mean? I'm going to get a whole flock of you know what coming at me.
I get it.
But I don't necessarily fundamentally disagree with a lot of it. It's just that coming down to that term. A lot of how you're saying it works and stuff like that, the eddy currents, I'm all on board with that. It just seems odd to say. Maybe I got to get my head wrapped around it.
Because again, like science avoids these descriptions despite it being the case. Like you could easily, everything I said about the airplane is true. You see, scientifically true. But have you ever heard it scientifically described that way? No, because they choose to tell you in other words, and the words that they use to tell you is that there's propulsion. You need forward motion. You need to push off your environment, and then, what happens, and then they say about the high and the low pressure, but what's the correlation? Okay. And then at what point do you break off the ground? Right? Well, the point where the high and low pressure are separate enough, right, that lift is possible. Well, then what do? Well, then all you do is change your relationship with the environment, because you're in a slipstream. So now you're surfing two layers above and below you. So by using a flap to sit there and put pressure on the back of this, right? Now all of a sudden your differentials are still there because you've achieved that locality break. Okay. Now it's hitting this and it's pitching you up. Okay. Because you're changing the differentials some more. The biases are now far greater on the bottom. So now you're able to pitch up and you're able to lift. Because the inertial component of it is critical to maintaining the differentials. All right. What you end up with is another axis that doesn't need to necessarily exist for it to be achieved. That's the fact that rather than just go up, hitting that back tab pulls your front up, and then you ascend, but you ascend at a pitch where it also changes your angular relationship. Okay. But the fact is, it's all still happening the same way. And if you had a craft that was just flat and floating, right, and then you were to raise the pressure differential the same exact way, okay, except not needing forward motion, then all it does is rise. You see, that's it. That's the point. The propulsion is the means to achieving those differentials. It has nothing to do whatsoever with anything, and therefore, airplanes are anti-gravity, and they've just chosen to describe it to you in such a way that you would never realize such a thing. That's it. Just like a generator is 0-point energy. You've been living in the future all along, people. You just haven't been given the good stuff. You know?
Oh man. God, I love energy. So much different than people think it is. I try to tell that to people that Joe, they didn't understand. We're talking about the piezoelectric disc and what it does and how fast it gives things to energy. But it's a fast fill capacitor, and it's a fast dump capacitor. So
Yep.
it's the barium titanate in it. Well, one of the things I found in a lot of these systems, by the way, is you'll find that exact material in it. So if you're looking, oh my God, if you're looking at how the Rife machine works or anything like that, or you're looking at what is the one where the guy made the two coils, might be something different, and he's pulling energy out of the environment, things like that. I just want you to look at the material aspect of it, because if you don't have that right, you're going to fail on every time you build it. So anytime I see somebody uses iron and copper instead of what they told you to use, they fail, and they fail for the same reason. Because there's an aspect of that material that you didn't realize was going on. Like, for instance, when I told them, hey, let's go aluminum, bismuth, aluminum. What happens? You build eddy currents inside of that bismuth, right? Because you have that potential inside there, and it'll continuously do it all the time. Or no, excuse me. It creates the magnetic effect inside the bismuth that you need to drive the eddy currents in the aluminum. That's what it was. Therefore, now they have the effect of the anti-gravitational craft, like you're saying. If you're telling me that the currents are driven from those, then they have it easily when doing that. And that's only in the state where you get it high enough in energy where it melts the bismuth between the two sheets of aluminum and creates it and keeps it in that liquid state that you get that field that produces. So
there you go.
It's the perfect reason to use it in between them. You just have to know how.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. It's realistically, once you realize the correlation and you understand the how electromagnetism works, right? What all you have to do is follow the recipe that already exists mechanically and do it virtually.
Yes.
And that's realistically all you have to do. And the same, okay, as an airplane does not need the energy of the sun in order to lift off. Okay. To do it virtually, okay, and not have to deal with drag and all these other things takes far less energy requirements than taking off an airplane, not more. You see, it's so breaking these limits, it's a formula, okay, and that's what it boils down to. If you look at it as any one component in the system having to break any of these differentials, and you calculated the energy that it would take to do so, you'd fry any system that you put it into way before you ever got any result.
Oh, yeah.
But when you break it down and realize that it's not any one part that has to work that way, it's the sum of the whole, and that it actually avoids material failure by moving from this type of vector, of electromagnetism to another type of vector of electromagnetism, and then the whole system works as a spinning wheel. The overall sum of the whole grows exponentially once the entire thing is built, because everything is working independently, doing what it has to do, and then also working as one larger whole that's turning the rest, making the rest more efficient. And then the sum of everything, each component, plus the sum of the whole altogether, ends up being at or above any limits that you look, because it grows in orders of magnitude once you start adding it that way. So it's the same thing as adding the inertia, and the forward motion in order to get your differentials. You're just doing it virtually, and you're doing it through energy vector. Oh, that's it.
Well, we'll get there.
Yep. Yep. We've been there. You know how it's got to be done. It's just a matter of following the formula. That's
What's funny is the video we're looking at with the guy that built the asymmetrical capacitor with eddy currents is exactly what you're describing, which is funny.
correct. And you realize that the energy requirements are not all that. And the interesting thing is once you virtually break locality in that way, you open the blood doors for the other phenomena that exist as well. That's what you do. Because once you do it all with energy and you don't have to use mechanical forces to do it, you're in the slipstream, and then it's high energy differential that you're working with rather than a high pressure differential. Well, all of a sudden, like, you could start controlling things a little bit more interestingly. Gives you more degrees of freedom. Let's say that, right? Because that's actually what dimensionality is by definition, is how many degrees of freedom do you have, right? So that's what it unlocks. That's why dimensionality is so important in this and omnipresent.
Right on.
Yeah, man.
Oh man. Hey Joe, I'm working on that project. You can see behind me I got my device over there.
I'm going to show you love because it's you, old man.
Dude, I feel so bad. That thing literally should have taken me like 2 hours to build, and I spent 6 hours on it. So yeah, I was happy though. I picked up a mini table saw. I'm missing my big table saw, by the way, big time, because usually I zip things through like super fast.
Mhm.
I was freehand cutting material on my table saw to get that done because of the side pieces, how they come off like this. I I made the ignorant choice of not pulling out a piece in between like this and then putting the angle on them, so I had to cut both at angles. You know what I mean? Freehand. Yeah, that was pretty stupid of me, but I did it anyway. And they're small pieces, so your fingers are next to the saw. So, but I enjoyed myself thoroughly in building that. Let me just tell you
Right
that.
on. It looks very clean, man, as all the stuff you do. Looks great.
Yeah, I got to paint it, and I got a big heat sink set next to it. I'll show you. I think I oversized it. Like, the thing's a monster. So I gotta throw it on the saw and cut it down. And then I gotta build STLs. You see the holes in it right there on the back and forth side of it. I gotta build STL files to go in there in order to put the plastics on both sides. But the cool thing is I'll put the Old Man Build logo on it, and then I'll put Bedini SG on the bottom. You know what I mean? And in the center, we'll just be doing the circuit. So I'll cut this thing in half and then get it down to the right size. So it'll have all the transistors on it. It'll look super clean when I'm done. And then I already wound the coil, by the way. It's not on there. Outside, you know what I mean? I think I showed you that. So all I
Hmm.
got to do is spin it on the main thing, and that's done. And then I put the magnets on there on the wheel, and man, it's ready to go. So we're talking, this weekend I'll be done with it. So
It's awesome.
pretty excited, man. It's fun. I know it's not anti-gravity and the other fun stuff we do, but it's a really cool thing to build out something that looks just like Bedini did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it really is. And I know that there's a lot of admiration in the community for the work that he's done and the contributions that he's made. So it's really good to see, you know, the captain of our little ship here doing it and showing it. And I know Nathan's goal is really just to go through the big names, and show what they were trying to show, prove it out. So, well, you know what? It's there for everybody to see, but all in one place. And then do what they never did, which is draw the correlations with all the other work, and have all these other concepts assist us in furthering, the means to our end, which I think is a little different for each of us, as far as what we want to
Mhm.
see come of everything. But at the end of the day, it's awesome. It's awesome to see you do that work, man. It's always looking so good.
Nice. Well, you
Yeah.
know what it is? It gives everybody the chance to jump in at the beginner level, you know what I mean, of energy and to start to see how it works. And then as we progress to some of the other devices, it gets to the higher level of how it works. And then you could see the cross relationships of how you can improve each one based on the one that you built before it, right? You know what I mean? Like Bedini didn't use any piezo disc. Mike does in his system, right? And it doubles the energy inside the coil real fast, so it saturates it faster, and then things like that. So I think it's interesting for everybody to look at it and say, okay, if we take all these in totality, is there a better system that we can accomplish at the end? And I truly think there is. As a matter of fact, I think what people are going to do is they'll start out with one system, and then every time we go through and show something, they'll add that to their system, and then their system are going to come out better. You know what I mean? And before long, they're going to be telling me how to build these things.
Yep. No, that's for sure. And it's I think the one place that we kind of see eye to eye the most, not that we don't see eye to eye on most things, but the most is like, you know, uh, everything that we describe is probably best defined by the rap, and I mean, listen, I'm not trying to sit there and put myself somewhere where, I don't belong or nothing, but I think that as far as having a fundamental, understanding of the um workings of the RAV, and all the things at play.
Mm.
Uh like I think that my understanding is probably at, maybe not ever the highest level it could be, because you never fully grasp, right? But it's at such an advanced level at this point that you could see exactly what the potentials are for it in like the immediate here and now.
Yeah.
And that's why like, for me, it's like I look at this other stuff sometimes and I'm just like, you know, yeah, sometimes you have to show it so it's in the record to be like, yeah, all right, here it is. We did it. We talked about it. It's a thing. But like, the stuff that's already been proven out with the damn plasma ball is, um it's just so light years ahead of any of this other stuff, so far ahead of any of it that it's like not even funny. It takes every single component of what these things are trying to do and actually does it, and then makes them all work together. And that's why, like, I should be more excited than I am, but you know
But you know me, Joe. I like to teach things and show people how things work, and You get your understanding from building and watching a lot of the stuff on YouTube. That's where they get all
Okay.
their understanding, right? They go, I started out with this motor, I started out with this project or this high voltage, and then I moved into different things. They didn't start where you started, Joe. You know what I mean? They
No, I know.
they they
I know.
usually when you get into this, you start and you go, man, I got my first Tesla coil running. You know what I mean? I got I got my first spark gap going. You know what I mean? Everybody's so excited, and for me, that's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. It's like the excitement on their face when they get it done. They're like, yeah, I can't tell you how many people are so appreciative that they just miswired something in their Tesla coil, and I go, okay, well, it takes me 2 minutes to figure out what they did and fix it. They're so appreciative of it. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely, man. You're it's like that. That stuff is just an asset because no matter how much you understand, it doesn't mean that you understand like how a circuit physically works and needs to be hooked up based on its configuration. Like you can understand what needs to happen in and out, making knowing what goes where, based on the components that are used and exist is a whole other realm of understanding. I guess just again, it's not again where I get caught up. I just find it kind of interesting. Is like you have the wheel and the wheel spins and right we always talk about like okay well this is the motion we look at it a lot of things mechanically but we know that we could induce these motions virtually and that's like that's where for me the difference is in all of
Hmm.
it
Oh yeah.
is like okay, cool. You got a spinning wheel. So make a field spin and then put all the same components in the same place. Have it modulated in that fashion, and then all of a sudden, bang, same effect. But the only difference is you didn't have to fight your environment to do it, because anything that's a mechanical object is it right off the bat. It's fighting the environment. It's the only way it can move. Every single breath you take is fighting the environment.
Well, like I understand, I completely understand. But if I don't explain how the fundamental systems work, and then I just tell you, what if I took Wardenclyffe Tower and just made it a piece of iron and didn't care what it had in it, and all I want to do is pull the energy of the atmosphere and combine it with the energy of the earth and use it as a capacitor, and just pull the energy out that way? Do you think people would really understand that? I mean, that it's that simple that's the only thing we ever had to do to pull energy on the entire planet was to do that, was to shorten the distance between the Earth and the field up above it. That's all we had to do. That literally was it to make all the energy you wanted on the entire planet. That is the simplest way to do it and the easiest way and the cheapest way to do it. But if you
There,
don't learn these
listen,
other
dude,
things,
there's a reason we have a weekly podcast that is typically 3 hours long. Okay, you could talk about these things till you're blue in the face. Now, if for anybody, and I know most of our viewers, they're here. They like if they don't get it by now, they ain't never gonna. But I think that the big point is that if there was just mutual understanding of the world around you, I could literally say like 3 sentences. It'd be like it's all the same, and it'd be like it's offset differentials, you
yeah,
know, and it's it's how you direct things. Like I could just say like these very small, seemingly meaningless things, and it would be like that's it. It's like because realistically, that is it. It's
that
like
is it.
that is it. It's like it's spinny thing, liney thing, up inside. It's like it's I don't know. It's just it's actually so simple,
Well,
which
but
is
yeah, but I'm just saying, um, you get to a situation where you get so advanced in this, you forget where you came from. That's all I'm saying is, I like to look back and build things, and it's fun for me as an old man to get out here and just, you know what I mean, do it, and then have the conversation about it. But the cooler thing is you get to put it on record, you know what I mean, that, hey, not only did you build all these things, not only were you able to cross the systems, but you were able to figure out the next 4 or 5 systems down the road that seem obscure, but now become, so relevant in why we're talking about what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, Edwin Gray's the one that's perfect to say, I understood magnetism in DC, and then I took it to an AC level and was able to drive it through the roof, right? And in small increments, because that's what it did. It took DC capacitance to fill and then AC to drive the motor. And you're going, okay. But then if I don't explain how, you did it here with Bendini, then you wouldn't understand the spikes of it, right? But then you wouldn't understand why capacitors fill in any type of energy that you put into them. It's all the rate of change is what you only have to worry about. How fast you fill a capacitor? Well, it doesn't really freaking matter what it is that's coming into it as long as it sees it as energy, and then capacitance fills, right? But not everybody understands that right away. But now you can't take that to the RAV and go, well, how do I change the capacitance to change the amount of energy inside of it, or the frequency or the amplitude? You would have no idea how that works. You'd be like, maybe I'll turn up the energy and that's it. You have no idea why the other coupling factors are there. But
well, when you think about it mechanically, again, if you want more frequency, then you spin it faster. If you want more amplitude, you make it larger and increase the pitch, right? If you increase the pitch, then you move more, right? You need more power to be able to increase the rotational rate, right? And then move something at a higher pitch, because the higher pitch has, more, mechanically at least, has more resistance, right?
But what if I threw you into free fall by just saying I took my frequency higher and my amplitude higher, and I reduced the amount of energy, yet it produced more energy inside of it? You see, that's not a common understanding, Joe.
No.
They think that you just turn up the energy, and because you scaled the volts and amps, it's going to go up. But I can tell you right now, I don't need the volts and amps as much as you think I do. I need the frequency and amplitude is what I need. And once I have those two factors corrected, then the voltage and amperage goes down to nothing, but I'll have a higher amount of energy because
Correct.
I made a better energy trap by changing how I understood fields.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. That's why you do the smaller projects to build to the bigger ones and show them all so that they can understand that, because I could show it all day. I can get you down to a trigger factor. You put my trigger factor at 1 volt on a transistor, and I swear I can make those Tesla coils at 2 feet away turn on and have plenty of energy at 1 volt, because I use coupled capacitance between several Tesla coils in order to achieve it. You know what I mean? The energy is actually in the air itself, in the environment. I no longer need the energy from the source as much as you think I do. But I didn't create free energy. I just knew how to.
Well, I mean, it's just
couple the
about being
fields.
able to, right? Again, it's about being able to create the local conditions of the area that you're hoping to affect, and have those conditions work with the environment,
Mhm.
to actually move the environment out and away. So how do you do that? Well, you have to have it drawn in, at least the energy potential of the environment, right? You have to have that energy potential drawn in to then enter the other side of the field where things flipped. Okay, now you're on the upside down, right? Now that you're inside the field, you're in the upside down. Things are the opposite way, and what was pulling in is now pushing out. And once you pull in and push out, and you do that, and it's surrounding whatever you're doing, now you effectively created a cavitation event around your craft. Like it's legitimately a cavitation event at that point, because you're creating an environment where it's pushing it out. And as long as you're able to do that at a rate, that breaks the certain threshold of your craft, well, then there you go. Up goes up, and then you change that relationship, and all of a sudden now you're surfing between two waves. You have a wave on top of you and a wave on bottom of you, and you're just sliding right on through wherever it goes, because you're pushing it all out. You're a part of neither.
I can't wait till we get to the better understanding where Tesla never told you to go where you should have went. Okay.
Mm.
And we started with the one wire energy on that and showing you that, and I kind of drive people a little nuts, but they didn't see where, and how do I frame this so YouTube doesn't take it out? When you place multiple coils together, connected one to the next, it lowers the frequency inside the total amount that you're going to get, right? But when you place them in a geometric pattern, okay, then you start to get different effects, okay? Now you're not only getting that, you're getting energy and coupled capacitance, okay? It's lowering the frequency. Guess what? You want to put something in hertz, but you want to use Tesla coils to do it, okay? And this goes to a very special effect that has to do with the human body, and I can't explain it much more than that. But the way to do it right would be to see, how do I say this? If you've ever seen the guys on the temple that sat inside what looked like a bell, it's the same effect. If you ever understood what that really meant, or if you wanted to really see what the gravitron, not gravitron, that's the wrong word. It's out here in California. I don't know why I'm having a trouble with it. Do you know what I'm talking about, Joe? Which one it is?
No, I'm not sure. Little help from the chat.
It's in the desert. They're oh god.
What is it? One more time, run it by me.
It's the Integratron. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you ever wanted the understanding of how that works, is exactly what I just described. Okay. Because of the way the Tesla coil works in frequency and coupled capacitance, and when you get those things matched to you, now you start changing things.
All right, so check this out.
I don't know that allows us to say any more than that.
So you said the parts that Tesla didn't say, right? And it's something that I brought up briefly in passing only one time before, okay? And I never showed you my breakdown of it. I don't have it readily available, or else I'd show it to you, but follow me for a sec. Wardenclyffe Tower, okay, was a 6-sided structure. Okay, it had 6 points that connected to the ground. All right, each was a flat plane that was in the structure of a tower, okay, that acted like a cone where it reduced in its diameter as it approached the top, and it did so at a specific rate that's consistent with, basically, golden ratio. All right, and each of the 6 points that connect, there's 6 sides, I should say, okay, which means 12 points. And each of the 12 points that went into the ground, okay, they weren't just bolted to a cement pad. Okay, they each had a single line that went down all the way into the water table. A big copper line that goes straight down into the water table, each of these legs, okay, grounded in that fashion geometrically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as the tower was built, to any observer, it would just appear to be some kind of radio tower for transmission or something like that, except when you notice that the structural support of it, or what appears to be, okay, is not traditionally set up in the most economic way to simply hold the tower up. Well, that was done because what you notice is that there are inverse helicals running up also at the golden ratio, okay, up the entire extent of the tower, okay, at which they intersect with the cross points in a cogone lattice. That's what it does. Well, what's significant about that? Well, what's significant about that is you're using all of these different geometries, okay, to structure the energy that's connected to it in the ground. And because it's a tower, it's at a much higher energy potential at that top altitude, okay, that bridges the gap of the differentials. It's arranging things of the earth energy in a more condensed fashion. And that allows for the transmission of then the atmospheric energy with the ground energy in an energy exchange. So people were thinking that, oh, this wirelessly through the air blasts energy out. And it did. But it also put that same amount of energy back into the ground as well. That was the exchange that was occurring. Then it was self-modulating its electromagnetism through the cogone lattice that was set up. You see, each point where it reached a triangle, okay, around the square, okay, was always in a state of fluctuation. Okay, so depending on what the atmospheric conditions were, which would affect the transmission, these would actually pull in the direction of that self-modulating and make sure that it was a consistent exchange. Boom. No, he's never said any of this, but here it is. And go look at Wardenclyffe Tower. You'll be blown away. All the geometries that we talk about, all the vectoring, all the ratios and the numbers, it's all present in the tower. And there was more than the reason you're told it was torn down.
Yeah.
That's it. They tell you it's because, oh, well, we can't let him get free energy out to everybody. That'd be a frigging crime against our corporation. You know, yeah, was that a reason? Damn right. That's why they stopped this funding, etc. Guess what? Once the cat got out of the bag as to what was actually potential of this thing, the thing came down. And then the military started building them in the desert.
Oh, yeah, they did.
The military started building them in radar towers off the coast all the time. And they'd be like, it's a radar tower. Yeah, it's a scalar weapon. The thing was a stationary Growler jet. You know, it was the same exact technology that an F-18 uses. And you got to remember something. When they talk about like electronic warfare, they talk about jammers. Right? Mm-hmm. To the general public, they say, oh, it's a jamming aircraft. You think to yourself, oh, so they fly by and then the radars can't see the other planes. Yeah, that's cute and all. These Growlers, they go in and they overload. They capture the signals of these different arrays and energy grids. They capture it, dump it into scalar, return to sender, the same as a reverse EMF, okay, a back EMF. They send huge back EMFs back in scalar to these arrays, and then when they hit the array that they came to, the waveforms collapse. They go into catastrophic energy overload because they pick up all the energy that they over the ground that they traverse, and then they power dump into these grids and arrays and blow them into smithereens using nothing more than capture and redirection of the signal. That's what they do. They're destructive weapons. They're not passive radar jammers. They jam radars by blowing them into pieces and ceasing them not functional. That's not jamming. It's blowing them up. But they tell you it's a jammer because it, you know, well, yeah, the jammed up, it doesn't work anymore. You know, and they could do the same thing to the grid, just like they did in Caracas the other day when they went to go swipe whatever his face is over there. You know, they turn the entire power off in the city instantaneously.
Yeah.
They won't say how. Okay, then they want to make you think that they're like, oh, and we probably use these weapons that we have that they drop these little bombs and they disrupt the grid. No, they didn't, because if you look at the data reports, they say that there were F-18s flying around that were growlers. It's because they put the growler out and they blew the grid up of Caracas. They're like, all right, lights out. Bop, 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 bop. Every single ambient wave that came through, they just returned it right back where it came from.
It's so funny. How much of Tesla's stuff is actually being used by the military?
Yeah. Well,
That's
I don't know.
crazy.
I'd say ask Tom Bearden, but he's dead.
Yeah. That's why, you know what I mean? When they start talking about, oh God, all these PSYOP people, when you get Green, you're out there, you get Lozano, whatever the next guy is, the grifter, next grifter that's going to come out and tell me that they're going to go over to Congress and brief them and all this other crap. They're all full of shit.
They're all full of shit. Been around for a long, long time.
They dude, what was that other guy's name? Starts with a C. Corbell.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that guy is like so fucking full of himself and so full of shit. I don't even know how anybody fucking believes that guy. Okay? Let me just pop my eyes out more and go, oh, this is how it's done. I only know. It's like, dude, you're driving me crazy here. Okay? They don't know shit. Okay? Number one, they have no idea how these fucking things work. Okay? Everybody wants to go to them like they have this big insight behind the scenes of how these things work. And they don't have a fucking clue in the world, okay?
Not at all.
I mean, sorry, pal, you ain't fucking got it. And then they want to tell everybody, oh my God, it's so much because of this stuff in the back room and all this other. Dude, give me a fucking break. Either you understand the technology or you don't, okay? Or you're a fucking spook and you got fucking spooks around you and you're speaking spook language to me, okay? That's all you're fucking doing because I can see obviously how it works, okay? So that's why I hate watching these fucking people. And when people talk about, oh, did you watch this? Fuck no, I didn't watch it because they didn't know what the fuck they were talking about in the first place, okay?
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of fucking grifters out to sell books, okay? I don't give a fuck, man. They don't know shit. I mean, the ignorance in these people. It's like you know less than somebody who took basic physics. I mean, the guy
Really?
with the physics
Honestly,
textbooks knows more than
hold
you.
on, Nathan, you're better off if all you took was basic physics, because if you firmly understand basic physics, high school physics, inside and out, you will easily understand everything we're talking about, because you just apply it everywhere you look. You apply basic physics, and then it exists. And hold on. Grayson said Wardenclyffe was partial design like a diode circuit. Teleforce was more of a full wave bridge rectifier circuit, and that it wasn't the death ray. Yeah, just to be clear, I wasn't saying that it was the death ray, but the fact is that it works off of exactly the same components. That it wasn't directed, right? It was in a diffuse state. And that was the point. As I said, it works as an exchange, right? And anytime that you're working in that exchange, you're dealing with the highest potentials occurring at the point of the exchange. And it just goes into diffuse states on either side, just at much higher potential levels. So it's not directed, right? But, okay, if you actually add more than one Wardenclyffe tower, and this is what Nathan was getting to before. Now, you got to bear this in mind. Now, let's say you build, it can't just be 2. It could be a minimum of 3, okay? But upwards of 6 to 8, ideally, okay? If you put them geometrically situated, all right, then you could create offset biases amongst their overall field, and then it becomes a directed weapon. Okay? Then it does, because it works off of all the same stuff at that point. All you have to do is change one, the other a certain amount, and then bang, there you go. It has direction. You see, but no, it wasn't Tesla's death ray. was never the point of me saying it. The point is that the capability and the mechanism in which it works is identically the same.
Okay, I just want to say this. I just want to clear something up. Grace into 2025, I was not talking about you in any of that. It's the Louis Alzandos, whatever the hell that guy's name is, the Corbells, the grifters out here, man, that keep telling you that they got secret knowledge and paperwork and things like, oh my God, I can brief the government on this and that, on, you know, who has this and where it is and things like that. Meanwhile, man, they get them into these projects. Like, what was that, the last one? The Booga Ball. What the hell was that thing called, Joe?
I don't know.
The silver ball.
Oh, the Boogosphere or whatever. Yeah, whatever that is. Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, they get into that and they make you think that there's something massive going on there, that there's some big government conspiracy, those people. Meanwhile, they would be useless in a lab. You put them in a lab and they sit there with the thumb up their ass and mine in Arkansas. They wouldn't know a damn bit of difference between, you know, an electrode or, you know what I mean, a probe they put up their butt. Okay.
Well, the thing is that they're the perfect candidates for it. They're the perfect candidates for it because they know enough to talk about what they saw. Everything that they built their entire thing around in this disclosure nonsense or whatever, you know, controlled leak of information, whatever their motive is, you know, in doing it. They pick the right people for the job because you don't want somebody that fundamentally understands the ins and outs of what they saw to sit there and start explaining it either. You know, you just want somebody that sit there and can make a claim and just be like, I'm not at liberty to say, and or like, you know, I don't know. All I did was see this. All I did was hear this. All I did was read this. Like, I didn't know this was a thing before I read and saw that it was a thing. Like, that's exactly the person you want because the information is limited to what they saw or read. They don't know anything more about it. And if they're trying to say that they do and to keep the air of mystery, they just be like, well, we could talk about that in a skiff. You know what I mean? And then you never get to hear about it anyway. And you know, chances are those skiffs, they don't really produce anything worth hearing anyway. It's just to make you think that there's something worth keeping secret. You know, and the fact is that the best way to sit there and, you know, muddy the waters of something is to sit there and deny something for a better part of a century and then turn around and be like, oh yeah, by the way, we were lying and we're going to tell you a little bit about it now. And you're like, are you lying now or were you lying then? You don't know. You know, you have no idea what's real or fake anymore because they've said both things at different points in time. And then switch their position all the time. You have no idea what's really going on anymore at that point. So they could literally at that point go out and show you and tell you the truth and whatever, and you still wouldn't believe that's what it is or that's all it is.
Okay, it goes down to, dude, real simple. Did you learn anything when they were done talking? Let me explain it another way. I can listen to Barack Obama give a speech all day, okay? 2 minutes after he's done, I had no idea what he was saying. But he's so eloquent. Yeah, he's so eloquent in the way that he gives the speech. You're like, I'm getting drawn into this guy, right? I'm excited. Yeah, I'm clapping all the points. And then when it's over, I had no fucking idea. It's like he brainwashed me through the entire experience. And I was happy when I was done, okay? That's all that I knew, okay? But these psyops are the same way. I didn't learn a fucking thing from them. They still talked and it sounded great. But it was more of you liked the sound of their voice than it was that they said anything interesting. But
I want to share an example of what you just said that I saw with my own two eyes, and it literally changed my worldview. You know, it literally changed my worldview. Years and years ago. In fact, it had somewhat to do with Obama because it was actually when Obamacare kind of got signed into law. It's right around that time. So now, if you remember, all the health plans pretty much changed at that point,
Hmm.
And at the job that I was at the time, I had like really, really good health insurance. It did not cost a ton of money either. Like, although I would have complained about it at the time, it still comparatively didn't cost a lot. Like everything was covered. My copays were super low. There were no deductibles. It was really good insurance. And I remember that they called us all, the entire company, into, a benefits meeting, and the regional vice president of the office, well, name by name, because this guy's a stack of shit, John Pham. If you ever watch this John Pham that used to work at Geico, you're a sack of shit. Just want to let you know. Okay. This fucking short little needle dick in a nice suit who could talk very, very nice. He got up in front of all of us and huge smile on his face, walking around with a microphone, proceeded to tell us that our health insurance was about to double in cost for us, that our copays were going up, that we were probably all going to have deductibles, and that a handful of things that used to be covered won't be covered anymore.
Hmm.
And he said so with such fucking positivity and framed it in such a way that people clapped.
Really?
People were clapping. And I thought
That's
to
what I'm
myself,
saying. They're brainwashing you.
and I thought to myself, I was like, I think the way he said it made you think what he said was good.
Yeah.
But he literally just told you you're going to be paying more for less, that it's going to continue in that direction. Don't expect any better, and don't really know what the future holds for it. So, don't hold your breath. That was basically the conversation.
Yeah.
Fluffed up with how great the associates are, how they deserve the best benefits, how they're making moves to improve whatever it is, like all these catch buzzwords, and a positive voice and a big old smile and a fucking ugly suit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's why you
Yeah.
don't trust politicians, because they do the same thing. That's exactly what they do, every one of them. And then you get all these morons falling for it, and they keep saying the same thing over and over and over again. And you're like, buddy, all you're doing is doing the repeater at this point. You didn't learn anything. It's hilarious. A lot of the world works on this. I noticed that. It's like, if you wanted to be the shepherd and they be the sheep, just come up with a good, awesome thing that sounds great, but be absolutely horrifying at working. You know what I mean? And
Oh, yeah.
that's how they get elected. Like the guy in New York. You know what I mean? What was it? That guy was horrifying. Hey,
Yeah, that's going to be bad. The sad
yeah.
thing is that the people that were dumb enough to vote his ass in, okay, when they get nothing that he promised them, they're going to be
Mhm.
dumb enough to vote for him again, because he's going to sit there and be like, "Look at how good I did." They're going to be
Oh, yeah.
like, "Yeah, we both." You know what I mean?
Well, we have it in
People do
California.
their
Look,
thing.
the governor shut off the water. Then all of a sudden, when the water is not there, we have less fire people out there because they've been running down that department so they could pay for the homeless. Then they turn around and then all these people's houses burn down, right? I guarantee you the next person they put in there is going to be a Democrat again, and they're not going to learn their lesson, and it's going to be even worse than the imbecile that they have in there now. Okay? That's what's going to happen. And then we're going to keep seeing the same places that should have already been rebuilt by now. You know what I mean? There's still going to be empty lots. And we learned absolutely nothing. It's because they come out with a shiny face and then somebody in the news goes, "Oh, these people need to be promoted." No, they don't. They're ignorant fools. Dude, I think I could shave my dog's ass and teach it to walk backwards and then be smarter than these people. Okay? This, I don't even have a dog, dude. But that's the way they are.
Yeah, man. I
Uh,
mean, it's disgusting, but it's the way that it works. And as long as money and leverage and power is a thing, there's always going to be somebody that wants it. So yeah,
oh,
it's kind of
you know
how
what
it
they
goes. It's
literally
all
did,
about.
Joe? Hold on, it gets better in California. They literally had all these celebrities get on stage and say, "Hey, we're going to make all this money go to the victims. You know what I mean? Of the fire. We're going to take care of them. We're gonna get all this money to them." Absolutely $0 out of over millions that were produced and benefited. The people gave their hard-earned money to. $0. I'm saying zero went to the people.
Wow,
After
no.
every celebrity promised it, zero went to the people. It all went to institutions so that people can get reelected.
That's it, man. It's the way it goes,
We're in a big
It-
psyop in California.
it's funny when you're just a regular person on the chain in the chain of events, that a little tiny bit flows to you and a lot of tiny bits flow out of you. And it's like you gotta do a whole lot of shit to make it keep on coming your way. But it always goes out no matter what. The thing is that when you're in one of these upper spheres of things, like your money goes out and it goes to benefit this, but then it just comes, you hope at least, right? That the circle of the flow of things is a lot smaller, and
Mhm.
once you eliminate all these pesky, peasant, people out of the equation, like the money just like circulates nicely throughout it. Like you could, basically spend and get, and it's sort of like whatever, you know.
Yeah, well,
That's how it works. So like they'll donate to that politician, but then they, when their special interest comes up, well, they're going to get a favor for that. Then bang, there's their money back twofold. Now everybody's happy. It's like now everybody's happy. And who lost? Well, none of them and all of us.
yeah.
There you
Well,
go.
it's like saying my health insurance went up, right? And you don't really realize why. Well, because the insurance company is now getting paid by the government, they don't need your individual donation as much for those, or I say donation, your individual premium as much because now they have a massive source from the government coming in. Once you change that dynamic, you screwed healthcare. So
Oh yeah.
now every individual pays more. Why? Because they can bilk you for it because they don't need to advertise to keep your business. They're getting paid by a big government source. I mean, I don't know why people didn't figure that out. And then they go, "Oh my God, but we need more of this." No, don't subsidize it. What you need to do is take the shittiest plan and give it to the politicians. When they realize they can't get good health care, then your health care will change. Until that day happens, it will not change the dynamic of what's going on. Every politician should be on the shittiest healthcare plan in order to fix the problem. Why? Because then they'll be like, "Man, this really sucks. I need to really do my job and fix something." Otherwise, they'll look at it like, "Oh, so many billions of people are now covered by healthcare." No, so many billions of people are being fucked because you don't understand the problem. Anyway, I'll get off the subject. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I
It's
hear
been
you,
three
man.
hours, man. You know what I mean?
I know. Yeah, we went off the stuff and went on to the other stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't parts today. It was goddamn taking my money and wasting it.
Well, thanks, Grace, in 2025, man. We'll catch up later, man. Awesome. So, yeah. Sorry, guys. Don't mean to get political on you. I'll drop it and walk away from it. So,
Yeah.
anyway, man, we had a great show tonight, Joe. I want to give a shout out real quick to Darren, man. Darren is totally awesome, brother. Gifted an old man's build membership. Also, $10, man. Super chat. Thank you very much for that. Dude, you're totally awesome, brother. Appreciate everything.
Right on, dude. Much appreciated. And speaking of which, don't forget to check out this weekend for the sale of the limited edition Tesla portrait that
Yeah, show it to him again. It's right
that
behind
I
you.
that I made here. There is going to be about 20 available and 25 limited to 25 altogether. And I think it would make a very nice addition to your office or workspace or wherever you'd hang such a thing. For me, it's my office. But it's 100% original. There's no AI nonsense. You know, it's all original art created by me, and hopefully it's something that you'd like to enjoy. We're going to put them up there for $150. Come nicely framed and matted, signed and numbered. And I hope you guys get on board with that and enjoy.
Right on, brother. I definitely am going to be part of that one. Also, just to let you guys know, I'll be on Traveling Fools later on tonight at 7:30 p.m. tonight. Also, Mike is going to have NASA professor, I believe, showing up on a show tonight for the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Guys, it's going to be an exciting night.
Yeah, I'm
We
going
gotta
to be
get going,
joining.
though.
I'm going to be joining Mike's show to
Oh, you are?
participate in that. Yeah, because Dr. Way, he has very similar, theories about, just how things come to be and time and all that relationship. And I wanted to see if there was an opportunity maybe to ask him a couple of questions and sort of see what he thinks too about some of the stuff we talk about.
Right
Or
on,
Dr.
brother.
You, pardon me, not Dr. We, Dr. You.
Talk to you.
You know what I mean? Like me, you, we. He seems to be a gentleman and very knowledgeable, and I look forward to hopefully having that opportunity.
Right
Also,
on,
I
guys.
just want to say that the word graviton makes me want to throw up. So if I just want to publicly say that. I've heard that word thrown around in videos a handful of times recently, and I was like, it's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard of in my life. Like,
They believe it's real, Joe.
yo, the gravity particle. Holy, listen, I could literally bang my head into a fucking 6x6 repeatedly until I was bleeding and unconscious. And with the brain damage that I sustained, I still wouldn't have the level of retardation to believe that gravity was a fucking particle. I've like literally no idea what kind of fantasy retardation exists for people to fucking think that there's a gravity particle. Just throwing that one out there. That word is disgusting. So anyway,
Man.
they make short buses for a reason, Nathan, and the graviton people belong on them.
Oh, that's great. Short bus to the moon. Oh, all right, guys. Thank you very much for tonight. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it, man.
Right
I'll see you
on.
guys all
Peace and
later
love.
tonight.
The old man built. The old man built. The old man built. The old man built. The old man builds is broken in the head. People not seeing reality has put them in the red. Where conscious and spirituality been stricken from the norm and replaced with the ignorance of basic magnetic form. The geometry of God keeps running through his head. That's what makes old man builds broken in the head. The old man builds. The old man builds. Spheres of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Has him forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to extend. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. Fears of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Has him forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to extend. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. Fears of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Has him forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to extend. The old man builds.